bad.
¿Cómo estás, amigos? This is Ricardo Varendas, also known as Ricky Brands from the Ripple Effect Podcast. A great episode for you today. We have 3 guests. They've all been on the Union of The Unwanted shows. These guys have all done work together. They've done shows together. They're friends. So I figure why not bring the 3 of them on together and we'll just chat and have a fun conversation. And that's exactly what happened. Today we have, I'm going to try not to mess up their last names, Tim Picciott from the Liberty Advisor. You can go to libertyadvisor.com. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his work. He's been on Charlie Robinson's podcast recently and vice versa. Charlie's been on his show. And then we also have John Sneisen from The Economic Truth, another great researcher, economic historian. His website's called economictruth.org, actually, so don't confuse that with .com. And then somebody else that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, Josh Sigurdson from the World Alternative Media. I'm glad I got those all out of the way. I'm like Sam Tripoli. I suck with names, and sometimes it takes me a few takes to get them all right, so I'm glad it took me one take. So today we have a great conversation. We get into what they do and some of their background. We kind of joke around a lot in the beginning because we've done a lot of these Union of The Unwanted shows together, and then we kind of got to know each other. We're just real comfortable bullshitting, which I think is fun, and then we do lead into conversations about what's going on in the world in the future and our perspectives and some of our life experiences. So really, really fun conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. We are doing another Union of The Unwanted show on the 30th. It'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. As long as my YouTube channel is still up, you'll find it on my YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, or just search the Ripple Effect Podcast, and it'll be live streaming there. And then eventually it'll be, usually within the 24 hours, it'll be up on my RSS feed. So if you subscribe to me anywhere on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, any of those places, you'll be able to get the audio version of it. And then also, what else? Oh, I have a merch store, the Ripple Effect Podcast merch, Patreon page. I also have a PayPal account. So plenty of different ways to help support the show if you would like. I am trying to push this value for value thing. So if you get some value out of this conversation or any of the conversations you hear on this podcast, if you enjoy them, if it helps in any way with just passing the time or just provoking thought, then try to give some value in return. It doesn't necessarily have to be financial, even if it's just reviewing a show, sharing the show, telling a friend about the show. All that stuff helps, and it goes a long way. So, and anybody who has been supporting the show via Patreon or anything like that, I really, really appreciate it. I'll put links in the show description of my guests' websites and their social media accounts, and also my social media accounts and my websites, and my PayPal account, my merch store, my Patreon page, so it'll be easy to find the stuff you want to find if you do want to support the show. I've also been working with Content Safe. We have a mutual friend, Richard Grove. He introduced me to him. Basically what they'll do is you can upload your stuff on one platform like a YouTube or BitChute or whatever, and they'll basically do the rest of the work and share it on all the other alternative platforms like Library and whatever else you might want to, or Float, or any other platform you might want to share to. So it makes our lives much easier as content creators, because instead of going on each specific platform and uploading stuff on each specific one and taking the time to do that, you can just upload it on one place and it goes everywhere. So similar to like our audio version of our podcast, where I upload it on one place on Podomatic, and then they take care of the rest. They'll send it to Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, all the other places I've approved it to be on. So hopefully very soon, with the help of Content Safe, I'm going to have all my stuff on BitChute and Library, Float, all these alternatives, and I don't have to rely on YouTube. It's just a matter of time before I get kicked out. I don't know how Corbett and I are still on there, especially Corbett because he has a much bigger platform, but it's just a matter of time, and I'm sure we're getting shadow banned, and a lot of people aren't being suggested our work. So let's go to some of these other platforms where we can support them. And it can be a place where there's not censorship and you can actually get some really thought-provoking alternative perspectives and opinions and researchers. So why not? And Matthew, the creator of Content Safe, I believe is going to be on the next Union of the Unwanted. He has a bunch of really good ideas about helping content creators and fighting back against censorship. And he's a really passionate guy about these issues, just like I am, and a lot of us are in the alternative media community. So I'm excited about having him on. My goal is always try to spend as much time as I can doing the art itself and having the conversation and putting these things out there, and try to spend as little time as possible doing any of the other work stuff. Obviously, it's not always possible. It's not always easy to not get involved with, starting a Patreon page and having a PayPal account that people can tip you, and starting a merch store, all that stuff. It has to be done to give people a option to financially support your show. So, and then one day you can do more of them, higher quality stuff, and then maybe even do it full time, which obviously you guys know is the goal. So the people who are financially helping the show, you guys are making it possible for me to continue doing this. Because obviously, if it got to the point where, especially when you have kids and a family, where you start spending more money on the passion project than you make, then it does get difficult to really take much of your personal time and invest in it. The fact that it's not a loss anymore, it's awesome. I really appreciate that. I think that's it, guys. I will see you guys on the next one. We have plenty of guests booked. If you support me on Patreon, I'll let you know in advance people I'm talking to and shows that I'm brainstorming and possibly getting guests on. So a lot of fun stuff in the works, and we also are going to have a fun Union of the Unwanted show with some awesome guests that I'm trying to gather too. So that's it. It's a long conversation, so there's no point for me to rant too long in this intro, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.
I just saw this clip of this military general saying that, everyone's getting the vaccine, they don't have a choice, and it's pretty fucking crazy. So.
Hey, did you see, go and look at that thing that I tagged you in if you have time right now, Tim. It's that guy that goes on a massive rant. Like, he's like the former, like, high up in Canadian medicine. He is like an immunologist too and all this stuff. And he's selling like currently like COVID tests, and he's like ripping into all the measures. Like saying like, this is the biggest hoax made up by media and health personnel ever in history.
We can't hear you, Josh.
I can't even see his.
This is first.
It was muted. Did you see the guy? I think you're talking about the guy who was talking to some people in the Canadian government about how this was all a hoax to control everyone, and it was like it was really awkward too, because it was in like some meeting of all these big figureheads talking about how to crack down.
Yeah, and I think and it basically got somebody leaked it out. That's pretty fucking hilarious.
Well, same thing. What was it that that priest that also had like that video was going around of him talking about the Great Reset and all this stuff. It's Trudeau, right? He just said it, just said it during a press conference, and then it was trending on Twitter, which is weird because I don't.
Well, he doesn't even have to say Great Reset. Like during his throne speech, like we have throne speech here in Canada. Because we got the Queen controlling us, but he said that they have the Green New Deal and all this stuff that they're gonna do, like trillions, like the trillion number, which is.
I think this woke up a lot of Americans to Canadian politics to some degree, because Trudeau has been talking about this stuff for years, Agenda 2030 and stuff like that. It's just in the context of what we're talking about now that it's become such a big story, because he's been talking about this stuff since he was running for office originally back in 2014, 2015.
Hey, Josh, I got a question. Are you hologram? Fuck, you look like a hologram.
I can't answer that question. I'm not allowed to. Once my people tell me I can, I'll let you know. But actually, it's funny because all these people, I'm getting all these comments, you're Illuminati, because I hung out all day yesterday at the Great Pyramids. I was like, hang out in the Great Pyramids for about 7 hours. How do I put this? Chilling? I was doing some research, and I get all these messages on Instagram and on Facebook and stuff, and they're like, clearly you've just proven that you are Illuminati, because why else would you go to the pyramids? I'm like, I don't know. I live in Cairo, so, Maybe
Kinda
I
easy.
might go to the pyramids that are right next to me. You know, it's kind of the most amazing sight in the world.
We gotta save some of the good stuff for the show. I got an hour and a half hard stop to pick up my girls.
Yeah,
so,
me too. So
Yeah, so let's do
Hour
it.
and a half.
You gotta pick up your girls too.
yeah,
All right.
let's get cracking.
I'm always recording, so like the NS
Everything is on. You can't say nothing here. It will be used against you.
Well,
So you caught that part about my CIA handlers?
Yeah.
we don't know
And the
what
hologram.
the hologram.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I got like Air Canada headphones. I'm pretty sure I'm not CIA.
You missed Roger Stone Monday, Josh. Did you see that?
Yeah, I had to give up Roger Stone to go to the pyramids. It was like the show would have been 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning here, and I had to get up at 6 a.m. So
Josh and I did have a running bet. I go, how many words in before John mentions Canada to Roger Stone? I think my guess was either like 3 to 5, and I think it was. And I think I texted Josh.
No, it wasn't
we were
Canada. It was
recording his time, like,
Manitoba.
yeah, I think oh yeah, it was Manitoba. He mentioned Canada within 3 words, so I think it was, okay.
Tim wins.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny?
Well,
So
actually, yeah.
it's I was kind of torn about having him on. Well, I wasn't torn because I'm like everybody's super polite, and I know that people will, even if they ask them questions like you did, Tim, and I'm glad that you did. I think your questioning was probably some of the best stuff of the night. But I'm like, I just hope everybody's polite because even with Greg Palast, it's like it was one of those things where it's like I want people to be open to discussing things with people from different perspectives, but I don't want anybody to be rude, And,
Yeah, as long as
I wish I was
name
on for
calling
Greg
doesn't come up.
Palast.
And like
Greg
disagreements
Palast-
are always good.
In the 2000 election, Greg Palast covered this one company called Choice Point. They were the ones that threw out all the ballots or got the ballots removed. They do a lot of the IDs. My father-in-law was the head of Choice Point and was the one setting up all this shit in all different places. And actually, right after the 2000 election, he quit because he hated Bush and all them. So I don't know if it was like the people above him at Equifax, which because it's sort of like a subsidiary of Equifax. So now he would never tell me anything because he's too smart about that. But it's interesting that I was listening to Greg Palast one day, and it's crazy to see how Trump derangement syndrome he's turned.
Well, but I mean, all the people with the Trump stuff at this point, I just don't really care. People know where I stand. I want Ross Ulbricht to be freed. I want Julian Assange to be freed, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, at this point, it's almost like you kind of just have to be nice, just because there's a few months left. Please free this person, free that person. You'll save their life. And politics kind of doesn't really play into it anymore for me at this point.
I want to be like, because when he started giving over the economic data, I want to be like, Roger, I wrote a book called How It's Rigged and How They Rigged the Economic Data. I've done multiple presentations on Trump's quotes previous to this. And I was listening to Larry Kudlow at the age of 14. So thank you for bringing up Larry Kudlow to me.
All right, Tim, we got an hour and a half hard stop.
All right,
Come
let's
on.
go.
You got to go pick up your kids.
We're already recording, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm already recording. This is, I mean, this is all good stuff. I mean, it was funny because I listened to Steve from, and Charlie invited him on from Slow News Day, and on his channel he said something like, or maybe he was interviewed on Jason Burmis just today or something like that, and I heard him say, it's like, oh, I don't know if you noticed my face when people when all the Trump, it's something like along the lines like the rest of a lot of people in the group were Trump supporters, and I'm like, have you not listened to any of this stuff? Like I'm anti-lockdown, I'm anti-mask, I'm anti-mandatory vaccines, I'm pro-freedom. If it happens that Trump supporters just happen to be in that same fight that I'm in, it doesn't make me a Trump supporter. No,
I think the bigger thing is that Roger had the 8 p.m. hard cutoff, and he was going on like a 7-minute long rant. And so I think a lot of people's faces were like, "Come on, get to the question," because Roger has to leave now, and then didn't get to say goodbye. That was probably the bigger.
Well, the other thing that kind of I shouldn't say rubbed me the wrong way, because I mean these things obviously are spontaneous and things happen. It's not a big deal. But Chris from Forbidden News. I'm getting his channel wrong, but he's a friend of Charlie's too. And so Charlie invited him. He's like, oh, I got a couple guys I want to invite. And I'm like, anybody who's a friend of Charlie's is a friend of mine. Charlie's, I've known Charlie for a while. We're super close. So, I have confidence in his judgment. But he wrote in the chat that he had limited time, that he had to leave soon. I'm like, hey, jump in when you can if you want to say something before you leave. And then he had a scripted rant. Did you notice that? He looked like he was reading it, and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like,
I heard him say in the pre-show that he's like, oh, and I've got a rant prepared. I'm like, you can't prepare a rant. Like 90% of having a rant is just having a fucking
Rand
rant.
is
You
just
can't
exactly.
It comes from
bottle
passion.
over-
It has
yeah, you
nothing
can't
to do
bottle-
with scripting.
Yeah.
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 There's always going to be those moments that come up. I've done over 1,000 interviews in my life, and it actually usually goes well, way better than I think. But there's always those moments here and there where there's a slip up either on your end or their end, and it just goes really badly. And I think my worst ever moments were Lauren Southern. I actually like her. I've known her since she was 17, but it was one of the worst interviews I ever did was with her. And then David Friedman,
was because-
the son of
yeah.
Milton Friedman, who was the biggest asshole I've ever met in my entire life. And I don't care if it's recording or not. This guy is one of the worst people I've ever met. Like, just a horrible person. And like, he starts making fun of my $6,500 camera. Like, what is this? What kind of talk is this? And I'm asking him about like free markets. And he's like, well, why don't you Google what I think about free markets? I'm like, well, I'm specifically asking you about healthcare. And he's like, well, what kind of stupid camera are you using? And he like just stormed out of the interview and was flipping out and thought he was like higher than God. And I'm just like, it was one of the worst interviews. I never released it. I still have it on video. Jeff Berwick has been telling me to release it for years. And I'm like, I just don't want to start the divide, but it's just, the guy is horrible.
Well, honestly, one of the reasons why I think Roger Stone came on was because him and I have actually had a really good relationship. When he was on, when I interviewed him twice, the first time I interviewed him about the JFK assassination, because I've done a bunch of shows on that, and then he was promoting his Clinton book, and then I'm like, yeah, I'll be more than happy for you to come on, and he was talking about how much he enjoyed our conversation and all this stuff. So, and then the second time, I believe it was the second time, he had some tech issues. And he was waiting for his tech guy to show up. So we were bullshitting for a while because he wanted the camera to work. And probably because he was in like a 3-piece suit and he wanted to make sure that he opened the audio. But we ended up bullshitting for a while. So, I'm a big bourbon and wine drinker. So I'm like, hey, what does Nixon drink? If you're chilling with him, what would be his drink of choice? And we're like just small talking. He was like super nice. And a lot of people that I know who don't even like him have said how pleasant it is to actually run into him and chat with him.
Oh, no, I've heard a lot of that too. And by the way, Nixon drank everything every night, apparently, and would call people at 3 a.m. drunk, and they had to shut off his phone line after a while. But
yeah.
I mean, I listened to the Roger Stone documentary like the day it came out and was, watched every single Alex Jones with him back in 2016. And, he was probably the best source of inside information.
Every single one. That's like 6 hours a day.
Yeah, I know.
He was on Alex Jones like nonstop.
Yeah, I was literally listening to. I was also training for Ironman triathlons at the time, so I had a lot of time to listen to this type of shit. So it was good.
Yeah, I didn't know you did that. That's pretty cool. I do a lot of shows on health and nutrition and stuff like that. I have a lot of people who, and Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and all that. And actually, that leads into a little bit of like the conspiracy and nutrition and all that stuff, and the ketogenic diet and how fat's been demonized or whatnot. But that's health and nutrition. I didn't know you were an athlete. You were is that something you did a one-time thing, or you do that often, or?
I mean, I was doing it for like 10 years, but I did I've done 2 fulls, 5 halves, and probably 50 other ones, and probably 100-mile bike rides and 200-mile bike rides, and running the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim on like a week heads up. And my uncle has the U.S. record for rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, so he's probably got you'd want to interview. He's fucking nuts, and he's also a super interesting guy. Like, yeah, he can definitely talk. So
that's wild. Yeah, but
Tim, wear a mask or you might die.
Do you ever go bike riding with Cuomo when he should be sheltered? No.
I'm in Arizona. I'm not in New York anymore, but actually, at one point, I remember when I was training up in New York,
Italians all know each other.
They proposed
wear your mask.
They proposed a bike license plate at one point in New York. I remember when I was in like probably 2010. They wanted people to have fucking license plates on their bikes.
They did that here too in Manitoba. Yeah, they did that here in Manitoba. There,
there
government is government.
How many minutes in? Cats are licensed in Manitoba too. Another fun fact.
In Winnipeg, not in Manitoba.
Those pussies in check. Okay. Okay. All right. So I don't even know how we even kick off the show now with all this banter. So
yeah, my dog, right. my dog was a Winnipeg dog, one of them, and she's looked like she's been to Auschwitz. She has like a big tag in her ear.
When can you start licensing your wife? Sorry. Anyway, if you want to
Stevie,
begin, you can.
Stevie,
Whatever.
headphones.
She can
Hey,
hear
it's
me in
called
another
a
room.
it's
Yeah.
called a marriage license.
That's true. Good call. That's true.
So do you guys think, like, with because it is one of those things where, Steve from Slow News Day, he went on, he talked about wars and all that stuff. And do you guys kind of feel the same way I feel in regards to it just happens that all the same things I guess that's pissing you off, and you want, the diminishing of our freedoms and rights and the lockdown, all this stuff. I mean, do you guys get that a lot, where people just immediately think you're a Trump supporter, and do you have to clarify that? And are you okay with the fact that it just happens that, like, okay, if they're fighting for the same thing I'm fighting, maybe in this case we're on the same team, and I'm okay with that?
Well, I mean, humanity is always on the same team, but I get it from both sides. I mean, at the end of the day, I've been accused of being a communist, which obviously I'm not. I've been accused of being a Trump supporter, a fascist, a blah, 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 blah. Insert straw man here, because they can't actually attack my points because they don't understand it. They don't understand just the basic idea of basic freedom. So they have to set up a straw man in order to argue against, because they can't argue against me. So it's Trump supporter, fascist, communist, whatever it might be. Because I'll call out Trump on the amount of bombs he dropped. He isn't non-interventionist. People keep calling him non-interventionist. It drives me crazy. He is not non-interventionist. He has pulled out of some wars, but he still dropped more bombs in his first year as president than Obama dropped in his first year as president. So I can't let that go. What he did in Iran with Soleimani, etc.
Yeah.
So, I mean, without a doubt, he is a warmonger, and many other things, including the Federal Reserve, the economy, the debt, all that kind of stuff. But if I call that out, I'm a communist, which is the opposite of communism, because I'm calling out literal communist tactics. But then if I call out fascism or something, I get called the same thing. If I call out Hillary Clinton, I'm a fascist, whatever it might be. It's Orwellian doublespeak, because all the people that attack you for a certain thing are they themselves are that thing. So these days, it's almost impossible to really have a conversation with most people. So most of the time I just ignore it, because it's been 10 years of nonstop. At one point on YouTube, when I had a YouTube channel, I would get an average of about 2,500 comments a day. And every single day I'd just look at the comments for 2 seconds, and I'd notice I'd have 99.9% likes versus dislikes, but every comment was negative and every comment was horrible. And it would just make you feel like crap. So I would just stop reading them. And I took James Corbett's advice: don't read comments. And I started doing that. And every now and then I'll just throw a response to a couple nice comments here and there. But for the most part, I stopped reading it, because it's always someone trying to throw straw mans, trying to reel you in. And once they reel you in, like a troll does, then, they all attack, and they catch you in little things. They screenshot things, and it's just pointless, because it's just a war on people when there's what I think it is. It's a distraction. It's like that saying, simple minds talk about people, middle of the ground kind of minds talk about events, or, and I think it's smart people talk about ideas. Yeah. I think I'm loosely paraphrasing here, but that's when you go on the YouTube comments, that's basically the simple minds argument. It's just everyone attacking people and yourself, not the idea, not actually dissecting the idea, just attacking an identity, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is there's a false left-right paradigm, and everybody is stuck in this false debate, and they keep everybody on, basically in this bullshit argument that you're never you're just round and round this merry-go-round of fear, where you never actually are able to get off this merry-go-round. But I'm sort of a conundrum, because I was in 2012, diehard Ron Paul supporter, ran a marathon carrying a Ron Paul banner, big End the Fed guy. And then, 2016, got super pissed off the Libertarian Party once Bill Weld said that handguns are more dangerous than AR-15s, and like AR-15s, we need to limit those. And that was my final straw with that guy. And so then I created a page called the Libertarian Advisor at the time. And basically I was trying to target libertarians to vote for Trump, because at the time he wasn't CFR, he wasn't Goldman Sachs, which for me, I mean, that was like, all right, well, he's not CFR, not Goldman Sachs. He was speaking some good stuff about auditing the Fed. You know, obviously I wasn't, holding my breath in any of this stuff. And so I was willing to give him a shot because I thought he could beat Hillary, and I thought, what's his name? Rand Paul could beat Hillary as well. But then shortly after the election, then I started getting into, cryptocurrency and realizing that was a better way of destroying the state, because I saw Trump immediately pick all these swamp monsters like Gary Cohn at the, his chief economist, Jerome Powell, and now as the Fed chair, and now Jerome Biden also wants Jerome Powell. I mean, that's everything you need to know right there. So I started calling Trump out on this, and I actually lost in early 2017 my biggest client because they were saying that I was too anti-Trump, even though I had reached 10% what the Russians did by myself on a standstill, and then immediately got axed as soon as it was actually almost exactly 4 years ago today. It was November 16th, 2016. I had a fake news list go viral on Facebook. Ever since that day, I was shot down. So that actually predates Trump using that term by 2.5 months. I listed one person by name on that list. It was literally just called fake news list. And then it was, CNN, Snopes, Mother Jones, Vox. I wrote most of Fox News because I didn't want to trigger, all the Fox News people, even though I knew almost all of it's fake news. And then I listed one person by name, and that was Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman, a year and a half later, wins Trump's award for most fake news. So then I ended up losing also during this same time period. I lost my biggest liberal client. I lost. So I literally there was about a week time period where I lost my biggest conservative and liberal client, because one said I was too pro-Trump, the other one said I was too anti-Trump. And now I have a practice where it's all basically hardcore anarcho-capitalists, libertarians, people that hate the government, people in crypto, and I don't need to really watch what I say. And so it's it's fantastic painting yourself into this box of actually believing saying what you believe and being in this position. But I think for most people, they really don't want to talk to me, because if I, mentioned how I did all this stuff for Trump, and then now I'm saying bad stuff about him, then it completely shuts them down. And then on the tennis court, had a guy say, come over to me and say, "Oh, I bet you're real proud of you not wearing your mask over there. Glad to see Trump has at least one more vote." And then once he finds out I'm not a Trump supporter, then I ended up calling him an asshole at one point, because I'm like, "Listen, you're voting for, I'm going to write in Kanye West. So, you're voting for, Biden, and you guys are voting for Trump, and those guys are both assholes, which means you guys are the assholes, not me."
You're
Now I'm sort of persona non grata.
list.
Yeah, now I'm sort of persona non grata at my local tennis match for saying that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it would be great if there was a hidden camera just on me, as I'm getting into it with all these 60-year-olds.
Well, yeah, I think people are confused, because that's how I find it most, is that they have no clue where to put me ideologically, because they never heard about the position of anarchy in the true sense, no rulers and so on. So they have really, really hard time actually understanding what I'm even all about. When I talk about voluntarism, they think that oh, you volunteer a lot. Well, I actually do that a little bit, but it's a whole total different concept that you never heard about on top of it. So there is that thing as well, and over here in Manitoba, it's our Conservative Party was the ones that actually brought in the Sustainable Development Movement. We actually have a Ministry of Sustainable Development now. So on our side, and I grew up in Norway, so I've seen my fair share of hardcore socialism, where we have an unwritten law called the Janteloven. And over there, it's basically every person, as you've been told that you should never be better than anybody else. So it's a total opposite of the freedom-minded, free market kind of you got to do your best over in North America.
Yeah, you're equal in
especially the United
slavery.
States.
Well,
Yeah.
John, why don't you get into what Norway is doing in regards to your father and not being able to collect his ashes and all the crap that's going on?
What? Yeah, so so during this whole thing, my dad passed away on May 5th. He passed away. I got a phone call, and that was pretty rough, because me and my dad was basically best friends, and we did share a lot of he basically made me pushed me towards my ideas that I have today. Not that he necessarily was, he still had the ideas of light socialism and all that stuff, but he was a business person, so he had that drive and wanting to have bigger things in life, so he's always pushed me that way. But so what happened, since he died, I've been stuck over here. I would have to go on literally 28 days of quarantining, forth and back, which is like a whole month, for travel, which is totally, utterly insane. And then second of all, there's an even more insane law. And I kind of remember why I was happy that I found my wife over in Canada and moved there, which now Canada is turning more and more Norwegian. But in Norway, there's a law. So I cremated my dad.
Anchor baby.
I cremated my dad. And so basically in Norway, after cremation, you have to put them in the ground after 6 months. You have to, like, that's the law. So I've been like, I threatened with lawyers basically to get them to not, do this. So now there's like, okay, well, whenever, this whole craziness is over, they actually had to tap out because I wasn't backing down. But so there's a law that you physically have to put a person in the ground at a regulated church site that is run by.
Get into the permit aspect of it too.
And so that is one aspect to it, and I can't even have the ashes myself and do whatever I feel like with it, and the craziest thing, if I were to spread the ashes, I can only spread it in Norway, but I would have to get an ash spreading permit by the Norwegian government. That is like, so, I gotta laugh a little bit about that, because that is like the most insane thing. But, nothing surprises me anymore. And of course, that whole Norwegian belief is really starting to shatter in Norway. You see a lot of more resistance lately. And I think also I've been, at least like I've been a proponent of that, of pushing that out into the Norwegian public, because Norway is a tiny little country. It's 5.2 million people. And I did have a lot of network over there. So I think, my views now has really started to push more and more people to like wanting to look at, actually what's funny in Norway, the Libertarian Party is called the Liberalists, which, is classical liberalism. So it's kind of funny. So it's very confusing. Versus like when I talk about Norwegian libertarians, I say the liberals basically. Norway. But anyways, so that's some of the insane laws that come up
see,
in
what you're
like
mentioning
Norway.
there, John, is interesting, because you always hear about these permits and laws and licenses and legislation, etc., that says, for example, you can't spread ashes without the government's permission. And I mean, the craziest part is that people listen to that, because I mean, what's going to stop you from going up to like a nice lake or a cliff or a fjord or whatever you got there in Norway, and dumping the ashes?
Stop you, Josh. The actual church is not letting you hold the ashes.
So what gives them the ability to hold the ashes? Do they take it from the
Mission
hospitals?
Impossible.
It's by Norwegian law. It's like insane. Like I'm just
well,
blown
hopefully
away.
they learn a little bit from their neighbors who they hate, Sweden, which I actually found that it's kind of more of a love-hate relationship. But it's interesting because obviously Sweden's super far socialist, but they've gone the other way on this whole pandemic thing. Though I do have a theory that they are going to go back on all of that, and it's a big false flag to make it look like Sweden was doing this all to be free, and then at the end of the day they go, oh, actually there's too many deaths, even though there's one a day. There's too many deaths, and they close everything down.
Well, so we're gonna have to go into like National Treasure and have a fake urn and like swap it out with like the other urn or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then,
we're gonna have to do a whole Mission Impossible shit. That's what I gotta have to end up.
They get to wear like sunglasses and look like James Bond and stuff.
But in Sweden, what's funny is that Andreas Tegnell is his name, the Swedish immunologist that actually did the initial opening. He's actually like just being side ran right now by the politicians. The politicians has come in, Josh, and actually are telling him that no, we need to shut down.
It's crazy because you look at Sweden and you have look. Taiwan didn't shut down, and they're actually better off than Sweden not shutting down. Like they only mention Sweden because that's like the main one that the media focuses on, even though actually compared to most places that shut down, they did the worst. But with that said, I think it's interesting because they've been trying to push people to support a lockdown in Sweden now, but people on the ground in Sweden must realize, look, the cases have gone up. The cases mean nothing. That doesn't mean you're even infected with COVID. The cases mean nothing. The deaths are at 1 or 2 a day, and you could send anyone those stats, and you know what you'll get in response? Oh, well, maybe I look at this other site and there's one more death a day than that stat, and it's like, it's almost like these people want people in Sweden to be dying from this just to benefit their viewpoint. It's confirmation bias, and the worst form of confirmation bias because it involves people dying. So you have these stats that clearly show that in Sweden, very few, if anyone, is dying. And as it is, 96% of those deaths are not actually from COVID. They're people with COVID. So then it's a margin of error of 4%. So that could mean 0 or that 4%, anywhere from 0 to 4% of that. So for example, worldwide, 1.2 million deaths. People keep saying millions, 1.2 million. But then if you actually do the math on that, if 4%, it's about 78,500 people have died from COVID, not just with COVID. You know how many people die with the flu each year? 650,000. Do you know how many people die? People who die with the flu is 10.3 million people. 650,000 people die from it. So if we were to use the exact same standard that they use for the flu, then we would say COVID has like a 2% amount of deaths versus the flu.
This is the blown out of proportion that this guy was talking about, Josh. It's they literally are trying to manipulate the numbers so it actually looks a lot better. So they could, push their agendas on having more spending on hospitals and all this stuff. Because
of course,
that is also
Big Pharma, the
thing.
biggest lobby in the world. And I just want to make it very clear because I was kind of falling all over the place. I was in bed a few minutes ago before I got on this. I'm in Egypt, so I'm tired. I got my rum and Coke with me.
You should probably get into going to the. But I just want
to point out, and just for simplicity reasons. Again, that's 78,500 people who died from COVID out of the 1.2 million that died with COVID versus 650,000 people who died from the flu versus 10.3 million people who died with the flu. So if they're fair, let's just start talking about people who died with the flu. Oh, those heart attacks, those car crashes, those people who, committed suicide with the flu. Now those are flu deaths. Now we have a real pandemic on our hand. 10.3 million people a year. That's insane. Of course, tuberculosis is around 1.8 million people a year. Of course, whooping cough is around, I think, 300,000 people a year, which again, versus the 780 or the 78,500 COVID deaths is a huge upgrade from COVID. I mean, again, this is very obviously the biggest scam in human history. I mean, human history. There's nothing that can compare with it because nothing was able to reach globally on a technological level, especially because they're using technocracy to enforce crazy laws and rules. Nothing has come close. People say, oh, don't compare it to Hitler's Germany. I'm like, you're right, because Hitler's Germany was localized to some degree. It wasn't in every country. This is all over the world, and there's no escape because it's under the guise of convenience. Credit card, social credit. You can't do anything unless you obey and get the mark of the beast, unless you obey and bend your knee and stay inside your house or else you'll get shot. You've seen that new Hollywood trailer of COVID in 2025, and it was the only film that was really allowed to be filmed this year. Interestingly, obviously government propaganda in the streets of New York when it was shut down, when no one else was allowed to go outside. And what was the movie about? Oh, it was COVID in 2025, but for the good of the people, they stayed inside. And if anyone, their temperature rose and they're watched all the time, the police would come to their door and put them in some camp. And if you tried to go to meet your girlfriend, as a guy in the movie did, he'd get shot on sight.
Wait, this movie's already out?
That's what they're preparing for.
This movie's already out?
It's a trailer that's on YouTube. It's a Warner Brothers movie that's supposed to be the big movie of 2020 or 2021. What is it called?
Because I had a guest on my show bring it up and actually send me the trailer. It's something Bird, or what is it called?
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea what it's called. I watched it, got disgusted, and exited out of it because I'm like at the point of no return with my craziness at this point because I know what's happening. I know what they're planning. I know they're going to shut down highways. I know they're shutting down airplanes. I know they're going to make you show COVID vaccine proof to go from one ward of a state to another. And I know people are absolutely doomed, even the people that speak out, because most of the people who speak out themselves will take the vaccine to keep their kids so that the government doesn't take their kids away, to be able to keep their job, their bank account, etc., to be able to drive on the road, to be able to travel. And that's what scares me most, is that even if people are against it, 99% of the people that are against it are still going to do it. And that's why I left the United States. That's why I'm in Africa right now. And that's why I'm probably going to go deeper into Africa within the next few months. And people call me crazy, but people called me crazy 10 years ago when I said all of this would happen. And now here we are. So, I mean, it's
Songbird.
Songbird. Yeah.
Songbird. That's right. That's right.
And
crazy movie. Look at the trailer on YouTube. Super.
I think we also forgot 9 million. I think we also forgot 9 million people die of starvation every year, and God, imagine how many now. this year with
A lot more.
How many?
Yeah.
the supply chain issue. 9 million is the actual
gonna say, 'cause I thought it was
official
like-
number.
I've seen like 20,000 a day, or will die of starvation, and you don't need a test for that. You don't need to.
Yeah, let's lock down the economy.
I mean, all you have to do is feed them. Like that's all you have to do. You don't have to figure any shit out. I mean, it is ridiculous how many people are compliant. And the thing is, when you talk to people about this stuff, it doesn't take long before they start admitting that, yeah, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. I mean, at my gym, they let you wear a shield, one of those like shields that people wear. And I'm like, what is that stopping the spread of? I mean, it's like literally like a foot away from your face. And yet that's acceptable. I could wear a rag, a bandana, things that are not, even if you want to make the argument that an N95 mask is your best option, they're not even enforcing that. They just want you to be compliant. That's my point. That's what I'm always telling people. I'm like, it's about compliance. It's not about the spread of the virus. And like you said, the PCR test has been proven. The guy who created it talked about how it's not designed to look for diseases. I mean, he had a mysterious, death of pneumonia late last year, around the same time that Event 201 came out. And
really,
same time as Bill Gates was fighting for the patent for the contact tracing app in November 2019.
While giving out plush coronavirus toys to everybody too.
Same time as when I believe it was, that's right. Fauci finished his studies at the Wuhan Institute of Virology into coronavirus in bats that was 96% similar to the novel coronavirus, in which it was a study into how to spread it to humans that was used with the U.S. government, gain of function study that used millions of dollars in government grants from the United States government to do this study, and magically ended at the same time as Event 201 happened, and then 1 month later, his funder, Bill Gates, is competing for the contact tracing app, and then within months, we saw what happened.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, did you guys actually see, like the whole Event 201 thing, have you guys had time to like actually watch the whole 4 or 5 hours?
I didn't
back in March.
Yeah, I watched a lot of it, not the whole thing.
The most interesting part was communication, where they actually go into like, oh, maybe we should just cut off the internet completely. Like they actually talked about that.
Well, that's like, if you think this Hollywood trailer is scary, how about the fact that Event 201 is the best movie that predicted exactly what was going to happen? So when Dr. Fauci or anybody else goes on the press and says we couldn't have been prepared for this, we couldn't have been ready, I'm like, yeah.
Oh my God. And they only, in that one, they actually said N95 masks is the only thing that could protect against the coronavirus.
Yeah, and gloves.
So it's like,
and if you look into Whitney Webb did some really good stuff on this, comparing Event 201 with Crips and Contagion as well as Dark Winter. Which Joe Biden keeps conveniently bringing up accidentally out of his dementedness when he's on stage and randomly starts trailing off about Dark Winter and entering a dark winter. Interesting, because that was literally an exercise in order to spread a fake pandemic onto the populace and then bring in a huge amount of government.
And also the 65 million that initially came out with Josh, that came from John Hopkins. Well, interestingly enough, John Hopkins is the one that ran Event 201 together with World Economic Forum and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah,
so
and they ran Dark Winter too.
Yeah, and like actually before that, they had one, like the year before, they had one called Clade X.
Yeah, they're the ones who are doing the body scanner studies also that the TSA was using, except the actual Johns Hopkins study were saying that they weren't safe and effective, but then the TSA then quotes a Johns Hopkins study, because one day I had a TSA scanner be like, oh, don't you know these are, safe and effective? I'm like, I've got like 2 hours to go for my flight. So if you want to play the don't you know game with me, I've got some time. Then I was dropping all sorts of knowledge with, Michael Springman, the head of the U.S. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia department. Anyways, yes, not the I think Johns Hopkins involved.
I think the best one. Yeah, I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was I was actually going through, like I had to go through a naked body scanner. Of course, I opt out. But Tim, as I'm opting out, I'm
waiting for the best part of this. So.
Like 6. No, listen, they actually let I think almost 100 people through without even going through the metal detector. They shut it off. And people were just like moving through as I'm getting patted down, and people were just looking at me like, "What's going on here?" Like they're all shocked. And of course, this is just like, "Hey, look at what we did with these people." Like, fuck you, like wanting to try to stand up against this.
Well,
I've had TSA guys recognize me on 2 occasions before, and it was really weird because this guy's like, "Oh, I watch all your videos." As he's groping my balls, he's like, "Oh man, I've seen that video where you called Trudeau a scumbag was awesome." And I'm like,
It took
"So
big balls
why
to do
aren't you
that.
quitting
Oh,
your
yep,
job?"
yep.
Why are you doing this?
I immediately lost him as a viewer because I'm like, "Why aren't you quitting your job?" Well, you have to make money. Yeah, I need to make money. I could go, rob an old lady on the street. Doesn't mean that wanting to make money justifies me doing that. I mean, and immediately he just kind of trailed off and kind of looked down and everything. And I'm like, "You're currently groping me. You are not keeping anyone safe. In fact, if you watch my videos, you know for sure that I'm not a terrorist. Well, I mean, in the common sense of violence sense of the word.
Well, yeah,
So,
but that's the problem. The government looks
Well,
at
you
us
are
as
you are in the
terrorists.
Canadian terror watch list, but I think, and also for our videos, you guys have to go to BitChute or Library now because we're not on World Alternative Media YouTube anymore. We've been stricken, and Josh has done some things like calling Justin Trudeau a scumbag right to his face, and pretty much doing the same thing to Bernie Sanders. Was also the guy who found Juanita Broderick and then did an interview with her that then made it to the top of Drudge Report that then Donald Trump then tweeted out, which then led to having Bill Clinton's rape accusers at the debate was basically indirectly because of Josh over here.
And it's because of this microphone right here, because all I did was sit in my living room and put a microphone in front of me with a phone.
I remember that. That
And
wasn't part of the interview, but I was sitting there right with Josh. That was fun.
The power that you have sitting in your living room nowadays is amazing, though YouTube is pointless. So I would suggest everyone go to BitChute, Library, and Float.
So I was just text messaging Richard Grove about this earlier because I saw him tweet something about Content Safe. Do you guys know what that is? Apparently, Content Safe is a company that you upload your stuff and they, similar to like a podcast host, how they will send it to Spotify and everywhere for you. They do the same thing, but with alternatives to YouTube. So BitChute, YouTube, or whatever the other ones are. And so you upload it in one place and then it will basically put it in everywhere to make sure that it's always available. And
that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think
that's something, an aggregate, I guess.
Yeah, I think originally their business plan was trying to take like all your old content and moving it over, but I have not caught up with them since they've, I think, maybe shifted their business plan a little bit. But yeah, I think Ernest Hancock has had those guys on his show.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, and I know what would also like kind of the end game of all this stuff is eventually to have some sort of IPFS, which for your viewers stands for interplanetary file sharing, but it's sort of like a Tor type method where you've got a file, let's say 100 of our friends have a file, and then then eventually they're becoming an incentive network going along.
It's like a BitTorrent. It's very similar to BitTorrent.
So, but the main point is there's no one person to go kick down the door. There's no YouTube centralized server to go, okay, boom, we're going to go take this off. Because and then as things get more and more popular, then it seeds on more and more networks. So then that way, maybe if something's not popular, maybe it's only on your server. But if it's something super popular, maybe it's on thousands. And so ultimately that is the answer, or something like that is the answer to beating back this censorship, and then having those actual companies like like a Float, or which they're actually about to get into this, where they will then host your IPFS file on there. So then that way, the only way it's going away is if you take it down, and then if the other people who are hosting your file take it down as well. And ultimately, I think that is where things need to go. And going back to our old websites, making sure we get people's emails, making sure we get people's even phone numbers, because
and emails, but not on MailChimp, not on any of those. I mean, MailChimp has been knocking people off left and
I've
right.
got MailChimp, and I just downloaded all my contacts the other day, so I've got them all backed up, and now I'm looking into some alternatives in this, because Dan Dix has had his removed. And
the thing is, this happened long ago. I mean, I remember Christopher Cantwell years ago, after that whole Charlottesville insanity, he lost his MailChimp the same day as he lost his OkCupid and his Facebook and his Twitter and his YouTube and all of those, and they all got deleted on the same day. Now, I obviously don't. Is
OkCupid like a dating website?
OkCupid is a dating website. Yes.
So they're
crying Nazi on OkCupid. Yeah, but I mean, and you know what? I used to like Christopher Cantwell before he went way off the deep end. But and I actually do feel bad for him in a lot of ways, because he obviously has some issues. But that day after the Charlottesville thing, he just went off the deep end, and then next thing you know, they used him as an example, which they later used to slowly incrementally drop down to Alex Jones, and then later on everyone else. I mean, I think it first started with like Holocaust deniers, and then David Duke, and then Christopher Cantwell. And then they just went all the way down to like Alex Jones, and then, obviously Press for Truth and myself and everyone else. And it was just like, honestly, there's no point in being on YouTube anymore. The only thing I have on YouTube right now is I post my travel vlogs on my channel called Josh Sigurdson. That's it. I just have a little channel where I
There's
post,
some other
because
weird
there's,
shit
like,
on there too. From the old days.
well, there's some weird stuff on there from way back when with John and I. But no, okay, behave, guys. Not what do you think? I do have to point out though that I had all these videos, these vlogs from around the world at historic sites that were history in the making, in the sense where, and I don't say that lightly, I was the first person to go to certain sites all around the world in very dangerous areas. And YouTube deleted that from the internet. And these are places that literally change history textbooks. So it always drives me crazy to, like, the only thing I'm really mad that YouTube deleted was my travels to places like Karahan Tepe by the Syrian border in Turkey, or to places throughout Mauritania, Africa, and stuff like that. These are very important documented sites that only I documented. And so I'm reposting them on YouTube just so that people can actually see them. But at this point, I'm done trying to reach people on YouTube, because no one new is going to find my content at this point in time. They won't suggest you to people that don't think the same way as you already. So there's almost no point. BitChute, I'm getting more views now than I did when I was shadow banned on YouTube. In fact, 2 to 5 times on average, more views on BitChute than I was getting on.
It's sort of a blessing too, because if you weren't kicked off YouTube, then everybody like, oh, look at Josh, he's just, saying he's gonna be kicked off. But now that you are kicked off, then people are actually now going over to BitChute and watching you on BitChute.
Well, one of the things that pissed me off the most, Tim, is that, and I appreciate everyone that pledges and everything through Patreon and Subscribestar, but there are a lot of people that when I got deleted from YouTube, deleted their pledge, because they're like, I'm not going over to YouTube. What? That's a waste of time. To BitChute. Why would I go to BitChute and library? That's just too much work. I'm like, are you serious? Like,
yeah, it's not on your TV, Josh. Come on.
Yeah. Now I've been censored from the internet completely, almost, other than these couple sites, and you're not willing to just go to a different link to see the same thing.
Well,
like,
they want an app. The same thing with Rockfin. Rockfin's getting popular, but a lot of people are talking about, like, when are you going to come out with an app? Just come out with an app. It's like, you can use a web browser on anything. I remember when I watched the Pandemic documentary, I just went on my Firefox web browser on my TV, and then I just put in, I think I actually went to Ben Swan's website.
But that's so hard though, Ricky.
And I went to Ben Swan's because I think the URL, this is how lazy we can be, the URL is actually smaller than Plandemic series. So I just put in ise.media because I'm like, oh, I'll do this a little quicker on my Fire Stick. So I just went there, and then it was right there. So all these websites, I mean, you have access to them if you use a web browser, but like you said, people it's the path of less resistance. If it's easier, then they'll do it. And I mean, YouTube still has that convenience where it's like, it's on every smart TV, it's on every phone, it's on every, piece of technology out there. And that
second biggest search aggregator in the world is YouTube.
Look at people like Jason Burmis. I mean, I keep yelling at him like, dude, get a RSS feed, put your stuff out audio wise. Same thing with like I know Ernest talked about telling Luke from We Are Change the same thing. Like, these people who are basically just video and put everything on YouTube. It's like, you guys are crazy, because like you said, like, it's just a matter. It's not if, it's when,
Well, you're talking to 3 We Are Changed former co-hosts, but I mean, it's
told that story, right? Tim, you briefly told that story on the Union of Unwanted, right? What happened?
Yeah, so Dr. Judy Mikovits, I mean, at the time, not a lot of people knew who she was. So she was the star of the Plandemic documentary. She worked with Fauci back in like '84.
Ernie was even,
Ernest
doing her for a long time, right?
So by coincidence, he started interviewing her August of 2016. He started interviewing me September 2016, and by coincidence, he always put us back to back. And so vaccines wasn't my thing, but I would, sometimes, obviously catch some of hers because it was either right before me or right after me. And so I knew about her and I knew the story, but, I wouldn't listen every week because I got stuff to do, but I knew the gist of, how Fauci was a scumbag years ago. And so as all the stuff's breaking down, I go to Luke, I'm like, yeah, great person, be Dr. Judy Mikovits. And then then all of a sudden we're interviewing her, and he's starting off, and then we hear all this, basically, she's, talking bad about Fauci and saying that this is basically a severe flu, and saying that, basically dispelling all the BS at the time, because it's easy to Monday morning quarterback things now, but we're talking like March 31st. I think the pandemic documentary came out the first week of April, and so after we did this, basically, Luke was telling me, hey, we need to cut this, get her off of here, and like texting me, this is awful, and you need to end this right now. I kept it going for another half an hour or 28 minutes. And so then afterwards, he, wouldn't let me air it. And then about a week later, she becomes the biggest story in the world. That was viewed like 1 billion times before it got taken off. And I'm like, we have the fucking interview. Like, we have the interview that we're sitting on. And
we got him at
and I knew, and then he wouldn't let me interview Dr. Shiva, because he's like, oh, you got me this other crackpot, and I don't know, I can't really trust your judgment anymore because of this crack. Then he finds out Dr. Shiva is, like a big swinging dick, and everybody wants to interview him. And he's like, how come you got the interview for Josh and not for me?
I want to just quickly point out that I know 100% that he's not a shill. I know a lot of people will say that he's not a shill or anything. He's just really annoying, and those that have known him long enough know that he's very annoying, and he does stupid things sometimes. I like, my whole thing is that people go, oh well, you worked with him, so you must know that he's like this Zionist agent for the New World Order. I'm like, no, he really isn't. He's just makes stupid decisions sometimes. I've had a lot of disagreements.
Yeah, he has truck nuts on his car. He's not.
Yeah,
trucks. He's not a Zionist.
For me, it's just that he pissed me off when I worked with him. He pissed Tim off when he worked with him. The thing is, sometimes when things like that happen, you just kind of have to move on to your own thing. And often when you do your own thing, you end up actually doing a lot better anyway. And honestly, we interviewed Dr. Shiva. We've done a lot of work with a lot of doctors and scientists and people like that. And
Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Del Bigtree
on multiple occasions through all this.
Mickey Wills.
I think I was one of the first people to interview Del Bigtree about coronavirus at the beginning of February, when there was the first murmurs in the news that this could actually.
Yeah, we were out traveling, down at Anarchapulco.
Yeah.
And at the time, he's like, you know what? The World Health Organization says don't worry about it and go out and hug a Chinese person. So I'm actually thinking that this is different, that this might actually be something big that might get out of control. Maybe it's some kind of actual illness that might hurt people. Because at that time, a lot of people.
That's what I was thinking.
Why is the World Health Organization, all these major organizations, saying not to worry about this, when usually the second you hear the first word about Ebola or something, for example, they go, it's a global pandemic, get inside, watch out, take the vaccine.
That's a global pandemic going on in Africa.
Yeah, and at the time,
I actually wore a
don't
mask.
worry about it.
I actually wore a mask flying back from Anarchapulco on February 19th back into America. And part of it was because I want to be a jerk to TSA, and I was getting my TSA global entry pre-check interview because I finally caved after, being groped like 100 times. And now that I'm traveling more, I'm like, you know what? Finally I caved. And my interview to get global entry was coming back into the country. And I was coming back in wearing a mask, the only person on the plane wearing a mask.
You will also soon get your vaccine.
And they flipped out. And I actually have a video of this. They were not happy at all. Why are you wearing a mask? They didn't ask a single question besides that. Are you sick? Why are you wearing a mask? Didn't know where you're going, business or pleasure. This is for my interview for global entry pre-check. And then, finally, and now that I have it, and now you can't fly anywhere. But then
you just said that you identify as Chinese, because Chinese people have been wearing.
Well,
masks
in July, I'm flying back, and I'm not wearing a mask. And now the TSA is on me for not wearing a mask. And so I'm probably the first person to both simultaneously wear a mask and then not wear a mask on a plane and have it documented. But at the time, I'm like, wait a minute, they're not I see these reports out of China, but it seemed like they were people were just dying in the streets. They're just walking, all of a sudden, they tip over and die.
And then they're convulsing.
And so I actually, so then by the time we're in mid-March, I'm like, wait a minute, I had coronavirus, because I started off the year traveling. Was in New York for New Year's Eve, had a wedding that was there. I was there till 3 a.m. open bar, so not the best place to be. And then all of a sudden I'm flying back. I caught something on the plane, and my first Facebook post of the year is I've been shivering for 48 hours straight while sweating. But at the time I didn't realize that was in February, that was sort of like a coronavirus and extreme fatigue. because in the news it was like, hey, you're just walking down the street and you're gonna drop over and die. And then I realized, wait, I already had all this and I didn't take anything for it. And I'm still alive now, but it's all been way overblown. And
in Wuhan, they're having a very good time right now. I don't know.
And I already
Well,
had
I just
N95. I already had N95 masks, 60 of them going into this, and a hazmat suit, and I'm not even wearing it. So I love when people try to get into this with me. I'm like, oh, when's the first time you bought an N95 mask? They're like, April. I'm like, yeah, I had it 6 years ago. Suck it. When's the first time you wore one? They're like, oh, like March. I'm like, yeah, I wore one in February. So
I had a whole bunch of N95s saved up from when I went to the Sahara Desert the previous year, just because of the sand. Because sand is actually big. Coronavirus, the masks don't do anything, but the masks actually do help against sand. But with that said, I'll break it here for you, Ricky. I've never actually said this on video yet, but I figured now that I'm in Africa, I can actually say this and not worry about getting arrested. Because good luck with the U.S. Government coming after me here in Africa.
Hey, homosexuality is still illegal over there, though.
Before you said, am I going to get arrested? Because I can get deported. I am also not a...
No. Me saying this on your podcast isn't going to get you arrested. This has 100% to do with me.
The only American?
Right. Anyway, back in the end of January, I went to Chinese New Year at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. And there were tens of thousands of Chinese nationals, including many from Wuhan, because China had canceled all Chinese New Year events in China. The number one place in the world outside of China for Chinese New Year is Las Vegas. So I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and I didn't know this was happening. I just went to the Bellagio because I don't usually go to the Strip. When I lived in Las Vegas, I just every now and then, special occasion, maybe I'll go there and find something to eat that's overpriced. And we went over there, and I looked everywhere around me. I was surrounded by people with masks on who were sweating and shivering and coughing, and all of them Chinese. And I was like, this is kind of strange. And I knew about the coronavirus. I was first reporting on it in the middle of January. And I'm like, this seems ill-advised at best. And because if you travel around the world, this isn't controversial. If you travel anywhere in the world, you will see the number one amount of people, imported tourism is from China. If you're in the middle of the Sahara Desert, people will say, oh, you're the first white guy I've seen in 6 years. But then you'll see 5 buses pull up, all with Chinese tourists on it. It was like the most ingenious way to spread a bioweapon. Now, anyway, so fast forward, I'm at the Bellagio, and there's all these people coughing, sweating, and shivering, clearly with fevers, walking around the Bellagio. And I've always been kind of a germaphobe, so I'd like walk by them and hold my breath as I'm walking by, because they're clearly sick. And there's a million of them, so I'm like, they're clearly sick. And I'm like, this is how we get coronavirus. Well, sure enough, I started getting kind of this thing in my throat. So I started doing what I do best when I feel like I have an immunity issue. I have a few shots of rum because it'll kill whatever's in your throat. Rum doesn't kill viruses, my friends. Alcohol doesn't kill viruses. Viruses are zombies. They're already dead. You can't kill it with alcohol. That's why this hand alcohol stuff is absurd. All it does is stop you from getting germs that can use a virus as a way to get in as a cold or like as a bacterial infection. Anyway, so I started to get sick, but I was denying it. I'm like having a few drinks every day, trying to kill whatever's in me. And then I end up getting on antibiotics, and I'm like, no, that's not doing anything because it's antibiotics, not antiviral. So I'm just taking all this stuff. And eventually by about February 5th of 2020, I was shaking and shivering on the floor. I couldn't walk. My legs weren't working. I have asthma, and I've had pneumonia 12 times in my life due to a mistake by a doctor when I was younger that destroyed my lungs for life. So I couldn't breathe, and I was going blue in the face, veins popping out of my forehead. And so at 4 a.m, I drove myself to an emergency room, and it'll remain unnamed. I got tested with a PCR swab, and it came back positive for coronavirus. Now, again, those tests for all forms of coronavirus, but I lost my sense of taste. I had heart palpitations, all these strange things that still affect me to this day, where my heart rate will go crazy, and I'll spend 4 days laying in bed because I can't, just crazy side effects that have come with this bioweapon, obvious bioweapon. So I got tested positive, and the doctor at that time said, there's this whole hysteria about this coronavirus thing. It's all nonsense. It's completely bogus. I'm going to write flu on your paper here. And I said, seriously, like, he said, if I write coronavirus right now, and because of all the hysteria, police will come to your door. Police will go to your friends' doors and possibly take them into custody. And at that time, it's the beginning of February. I'm going, what? This is insane. And this doctor saved my ass, because I wouldn't even be able to travel, because they claim that you can still get it twice, which is nonsense. It would be the first virus in history. They say you can get it twice. So I wouldn't be able to do anything. I'd still be stuck in Nevada right now, and probably under watch from the police, because everyone that's had it is under watch constantly after they've had it. So I ended up being able to get out scot-free, and I was able to travel after that, later that month, after 14 days had passed, which is an arbitrary timeline, but is decent enough time distance between being sick. I went to Acapulco, Mexico. I went to Hollywood to shoot a National Geographic documentary. And then
should have went there while you were sick, but no.
And then yeah, right. And then I went to then I moved to Mexico last second in March.
Then you went to Sam. Then you went to Sam Tripoli. Then went to Sam Tripoli's after Hollywood too. So.
Yeah, I was on Sam Tripoli's show at least about 16 days after I was sick. So
well, I mean, just by coincidence here. So this was like January 3rd that I started getting really sick, and I think Sam played a show out here on January 9th or 10th. And the very first thing that I went back to when I started feeling semi okay was his comedy show. But he was kind of far away from me. But I'm like, nah, man, I don't really feel that great. And I kind of like a far away kind of fist bump type thing, and told him kind of to stay away.
How dare you risk Sam Tripoli, Tim?
You wouldn't have gotten on his show if it wasn't for me doing that, and we wouldn't be here talking to Ricky if it wasn't for me doing that. So
play the clip of Greta Thunberg. How dare you?
How dare you?
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, were sick early this year, and it was because of the virus. There's so much. That's the thing, is there's so much disinformation, misinformation. You look at the pandemic documentary, the full film. I mean, it really connects the dots. It really well. I mean, Mickey Willis killed it with just showing all the patents, all the financial gain, and then he even gets into stuff that we know, but maybe a lot of people don't know about Operation Mockingbird. And I mean, it was so obvious that we're being lied to. The first 50 deaths in the U.S. were all in one nursing home, and they just kept televising 50 deaths, and yet they wouldn't tell you that piece of information that could be reassuring, because they want to keep spreading information that scares you. That's why they're talking about cases now, and they're done talking about deaths, because the deaths, the percentage is so low now that they don't want to give you any reassuring information. And that's the thing. It just, what's the finish line, right? When is this going to end? People who are wearing the masks and think that, just wear them a little longer, just do this. I'm like, they keep changing what we're supposed to be attempting to do. First, it was curve the line, curve the
flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve. It was deaths. I'm glad you jumped in there. I might have. I could have stuttered for another hour. But flatten the curve, and then it's flattening the curve, but to flatten the curve of cases, which is just ridiculous. If 90% of people don't even know they have the virus and are getting tested just because they're around somebody else who didn't know they had the virus and got tested, who was next to somebody else who, I'm like, what the hell are we doing?
You get the sniffles. And you point out something really important there, which is that the pharmaceutical giants, first of all, I got to point out that the World Health Organization said lockdowns are stupid, and then the next day it was overshadowed by global lockdowns. The pharmaceutical issue is a huge part of it. Follow the money, and you'll see that they've made hundreds of billions of dollars off of this. And TV stations, 90% of their funding comes from pharmaceutical companies who are paid. They're paying them to spread fear. But you ask, when will this end? It won't. It will not end. We are at the very beginning of this. And if people only understood what was going to come up in the next 2 years, they would leave the United States or do whatever they could to protect themselves now, because
Thomas Jefferson,
it's tragic.
I mean, Thomas Jefferson said the amount of tyranny you get is the amount of tyranny you put up with. And so people are like, we just need to give up our rights in order to get our rights back. When in history have you ever given up your rights to get your rights back?
Exactly. And remember, 5 years till the Great Reset. Okay, so 2025, and then 2030, the depopulation agenda, 600 million people on Earth. How will they do that? Okay, so you'll have a massive economic crisis that will basically shove 90% of people into poverty, and then you have just the elite ruling everyone else, as we see today. But I mean, we're talking about 0.0001%.
So there is an article by Klaus. There's a Klaus Schwab article.
Yeah, you will own nothing and be super happy. That's what he says.
Well, but that's what I mean though, because they're pushing to this point where if everyone's house moratoriums expire, then we're looking at probably, they say 1 in 10, but that was months ago. It could be 2 in 10 at this point. People go homeless, so the bank seizes their homes, but the government saves their homes from being seized.
And now the Fed
owns 20% of homes.
And now the Fed,
and that's communism.
The Federal Reserve actually owns a third of all mortgages that they bought throughout this whole thing. And then you got, BlackRock is the nation's largest, basically, landlord. But what if, right now we basically are coming up to basically a year of people staying indoors, because if you're in the Northeast, I mean, I'm in Arizona, it's a little bit different over here, but you're in the Northeast, it starts getting cold in October, and you've been, for the most part, people, and then right around March comes the lockdown. So right when they started being able to get outside again is usually March. I'm from Syracuse, New York, one of the snowiest places in the country or the world, really. So it's, we're starting to get outside over there in March. And so people that have been locked up in like New York City or at Boston and in the Northeast, you're going on a year of being indoors. And when you're indoors, you're not getting vitamin C. And then if you're trying to take, vitamin D. You're not getting vitamin D. But then I was going to bring up vitamin C, because then Susan Wojcicki of the YouTube CEO, they tried to say, okay, well, people aren't allowed to give, quackery, health, advisements. They're like, oh, can you give us an example? She's like, oh, like vitamin C. I'm like, vitamin C, like that, like out of all different things you can name, that's the one you name, vitamin C.
That's what cured my coronavirus. So I took 25,000 milligrams in.
So now you're going on a year of not being outside. You're not getting vitamin D. I've got bright lights on me, so I've got a bigger tan than what I look like. But people aren't taking vitamin C. They aren't taking all the things
you're what Luke Rudowski called Urkel.
Urkel.
Well, they were talking about that. You need 5,000. So, like for people that get sick, you need 5,000. What is the unit that they use for measurement on vitamin D? But you need 5,000 units in this measurement, and they actually said that you need to give that to the people that get really sick. Now, one thing that we're not talking about is like, why are we not doing that every single day? Why are we not?
Now even Fauci now is like, oh yeah, I supplement with vitamin D. I'm like, oh yeah, thanks for telling everybody else that, because we would get our YouTube channels taken down if we mentioned that sort of stuff. But this is now going to make people naturally get very, very, very sick, because now they've been a year without any sunlight, and even people in Arizona, which is because it's so sunny here in the summertime, it's almost like the opposite, because people stay indoors in the summertime. So even though I live right by Sun City, people here are extremely vitamin D deficient because they cover up and they're not getting outside in the summertime. So now we're going on a year, and then now you take all these people, let's say when the lockdowns ended in like May and June, depending on where you're at in the country, take all these people who've been inside now for a year, or at the time, for 6 months, and then now they're all coming outside at the same time, for the ones that aren't scared, and now they're giving each other's germs, but they weren't getting germs because they were quarantined in their house. And so now common stuff is going to start messing people up more. And the fact
the microbiome is screwed, basically.
Well, I want to point out something that an Egyptian told me here, because I'm living in Cairo, and this guy came up to me and we were talking a bit, and he said, Canadians seem like very scared people. And I said, well, I agree, but why? What's your explanation for this? He's like, well, they all stay inside. They don't talk to each other. They don't shake hands. They don't have a life. They have a good economy, but they have no life. Well, I didn't educate him on the economy, but nonetheless, he said they have a good economy, but they have no life. We have a bad economy, and we have a life, and we live and we talk to each other and we socialize, and we actually have a good life despite our bad economy. And I think that's a really interesting point.
You're saying that about Canadians, but fuck, have you ever been to Norway? Canadians were extremely social to me, so that's for me. Anyway, like talking about Norway as well, I've been all the way up, past where you have midnight sun, and 6 months of the year there's no sun up there. Well, what was interesting, like that I kind of like caught my attention, was that there was mass amounts of depression up there, and people were really struggling with a lot of illnesses up there, because 6 months out of the year you have zero sun on your body, and then you get sun like 24/7 basically after that. So you get really deficient in the periods, and then of course, like, as I'm gonna just come back to this, but like I'm taking right now, and I've been taking for 2 months, I've been taking a ton of vitamins, because I know that it'll strengthen my immune system. But I'm gonna start doing this like every single day of every year, because it's the people like to cure things when they come, but how about just working on it as it progresses, and then protect yourself all the time.
Yeah,
I believe that long term that things are going to get better. Long term. I want to be completely blunt with you guys, though. The first thing they do is they
Once
come to the
90% of
journalists.
people who have taken the coronavirus have been,
The 95.
deceased, then
Also,
I
the
do wanna-
Pfizer vaccine.
then it'll get better.
I
We'll
want
have to
to
deal with other
be blunt
bullshit.
about this. I do believe that within the next 10 years, and probably a lot sooner than 10 years, they're going to be purging journalists in a way that they're not just taking them off of YouTube. They come for the journalists first. They come for the people who tell alternative stories. And this is the way it is all over the world. The United States is coddled. Canada is coddled. Britain is coddled. And they have absolutely no idea what they're walking into because they couldn't believe that anything could get as crazy as this. In Nazi Germany, people wouldn't leave Germany when the crackdown started because they couldn't believe that they were living in such an apocalyptic atmosphere. They couldn't believe it, and they looked at people and called them crazy. They called other Jews crazy. They called other activists crazy for leaving Germany at that time. And we know what happened next. And the same could be said to the business owners in Stalinist Russia. Oh, well, surely this won't last forever. Surely we'll be able to keep running our businesses, our mom and pop shops. Surely we'll be able to run our hotel. And those people are dead now. And the journalists that spoke out about it are dead now. And not just because it's been 100 years. I mean, they died within the first 5 to 10 years of this. And I mean, I want to be completely blunt. The reason I came to Africa is because I believe I can survive in Africa. At the end of the day, I can speak from anywhere. I can speak from the United States. I can speak from Africa, but I can speak on decentralized platforms. And the reason I'm not in the United States is because I want to be completely honest, and it's sad, and it really hurts me to say this, but most journalists that speak the truth are going to be gone in 5 to 10 years. And I will be able to preserve my voice and speak to future generations and warn them about what's happening today. And I people think it's crazy, but I haven't been.
Well,
wrong
everyone
about
else on this podcast is dead. So, Josh,
I want to be completely honest with you. I think every one of you needs to get the hell out of there because you don't want to be in an empire when it collapses. And it's I can't explain this to everyone, and I can't make everyone do that, and I can't make everyone leave their homes behind, but there's something almost biblical about it where people are attached to a place because they have their work here, they have their house here, they have their books, they have their computer, they have their things. Their things are what's holding them back. I sold everything I own. I don't own anything other than what's in my backpack, this laptop here, my phone. I'm in Airbnbs in Africa. And the reason I did that, and people will call me crazy now, these are Air Canada headphones that I got off an Air Canada flight. They're like literally, like seriously, I have almost nothing, but it's the best feeling I've ever had in my life was to get rid of that stuff. And
Sean was right.
People are, I believe in private property. I believe in private property. But with that said, I also believe that there's a lot that holds people back with private property. It ties them down. The reason why people don't get up and leave isn't because their family's there, because they could bring their family with them. It is because they have a house. It's because they have a living room table, a fridge.
Debt is, and this goes into colleges. I mean, debt is one of the biggest controllers of your life, because the second you have that house you have to pay off, the second you have those credit cards, that college debt, you don't have the flexibility. You can't leave, you can't move. Dr. Christopher Ryans, who wrote Civilized to Death and Sex at Dawn, he's been on my show, and I was almost on a Union of the Unwanted and like jumped out at right when we went live. But he talked about this. He was in Spain, and then somebody tricked him. Like they said, he was actually his last day in Spain. He was leaving, and then they're like, "Hey, do you know where this is or whatever?" And he's like, "Oh, that happens to be the one place I know where it is in Spain." And he turned around, pointed, and then next thing you know, all his luggage was gone. And he's like, "Shit!" So then he ended up calling somebody he knew in Spain and staying there for a while. But then he realized, like, I didn't get any of that shit back. And I realized I didn't need any of it and he, he became a minimalist. And it is one of those things where we think we have, like, and a lot of it's the power of marketing and TV and telling you that, hey, your value is based on how new your house is and how new your car is and how
you have to have this. How could you not have those things? Because everyone else does.
And it's Edward Bernays. I mean, it's propaganda. It's marketing. I mean, you go to college for marketing, you're learning the techniques of Edward Bernays, but you don't realize that what it's really doing, it's getting into your subconscious. It's pulling at your desires, and it's making you want something that you don't really need or maybe even want,
Yeah.
you know? And
And they really
Good
went after
times.
Kanye West when he started going into the century of yourself or century of enslavement, when he started tweeting that out. That's when they really started going after Kanye a few years ago.
Century of
But you
enslavement.
started getting into debt and mortgage. Do you know what the root word of mortgage is?
that.
Basically in French is death contract
Yeah.
is what it stands for in
Yeah.
French.
Mortier.
And then
Mortgage.
bond, it's bondage. I mean, you're like in like basically slavery. And because the Federal Reserve, and how I woke up to everything is because the Federal Reserve never had that money to begin with. So for your listeners, the Federal Reserve is a private entity that has
Wait.
a
Listen to
basically a
I was just gonna say, I'm glad you're saying this because I just had this guy Clint Robinson on. He did a documentary. What the hell is it called? It's called Lethal Injection, and then another one called. This is what I love about long form conversations, because if I only had a 1 hour conversation with him, I'd be like, I'm all on board with everything. And then he went on this the Federal Reserve isn't really private rant and all this other stuff, and I'm just like, oh god. And he talked about calling out James Corbett, and he should have acknowledged that he was wrong and all this stuff, and I'm like,
that it isn't really
so
private.
he thinks that this whole movement of like the Federal Reserve being private is ridiculous, and that it's
Go and read the Federal Reserve Act. It's right
On-
there, right in your
On
face.
their own website, it says
Yeah.
that they give back 6% of all the dividends of all the interest.
Yeah.
Sorry, they give back
Paragraph
94%. They give back 94% of all the dividends of all the interest of all the debt back to the Treasury, which is a Edward Bernays tactic. Instead of saying we keep 6%, so who's we? It's owned by the underlying member banks, who are then owned by other people, but they have a They have a sort of like a public-private partnership where they then have the government's guns to then back them up, and then they have legal tender laws where you have to use their note. It says Federal Reserve note. But the biggest scam issue of this is whether it's private or not, this part of it doesn't matter. So let's say, when the Fed was created December 23rd, 1913, they issue $1 at the time. The interest rate was 4%. So let's say it was a 1-year bond. If you lend out, let's say I lend $1 to Ricky and say, okay, Ricky, you owe me $1.04 at the end of the year, but there's only $1 in the system. How do you pay back $1.04 with $1?
The
You
magic bank account.
It's mathematically impossible. So from day one, there is no paying off the debt, because that dollar bill is backed by a bond, a Treasury bill, bond, or note. So so basically, one of the biggest realizations people need to have is that your money is debt. Your money is backed by debt, meaning that, and so the greatest, I think, enslavement that's ever gone on, and the biggest scam in the history of the world, even I think bigger than the coronavirus scam, is the fact that our money is backed by debt. And now this whole thing is going to so everyone is talking about.
But Tim, I have to ask then, like, why does it matter whether it's private or public? This is something that's really kind of annoying me.
Well, that's what I just said. That's what I just said.
Really
It doesn't even matter. Yeah.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter if people should not use the dollar. It's like people they say, well, taxes. I'm held down by all these taxes. Well, I'm not going to say what I think, but like, it's kind of like, what are you going to do?
Well, I just paid a lot of taxes today, so in case the IRS wants to come after me, but no,
but I mean, that's the thing though, because I'd rather I don't want to die because I have debt. So in the case of escaping a country because you have debt, which, just getting back to Ricky's initial point there, people have all this debt. Well, if it's your life or your death, then deal with having debt, because I'd rather have debt than be dead. And if you're going to go to the other side of the world, let's see the debt collectors follow you to Africa, or follow you to the Middle East, or follow you throughout Asia, or follow you to any of these places. I'm from Canada. Let's see the Canadian government, which they're not even going to get involved in it, because they're going to give it to some debt collector that is a no name, and then I'll just say
the Canadian government managed to lose money selling weed. I mean, how the fuck do you lose money selling weed? I mean, they couldn't even make money doing that.
They're desperate right now. Actually, that's one of the reasons why they have BEPS right now, which is base erosion and profit shifting, which is 100 countries sharing tax background with everybody, because they are desperate, because they know that this is happening, Josh. So they're trying their very best to actually get that, and trying to retrieve some of that money that they stole from you in the first place, that you don't want to give back to them. And second of all, if you go and look throughout history, we always had this swing between centralization to decentralization of civilizations. And it always happens throughout history. And also another very important thing is that we're starting to forget how to feed ourselves. anymore. And the number one thing a human being needs is water and food. Well, look at, you know, the average age of farmers around the
Oxygen.
world.
Yeah.
I thought it was Gucci and Prada.
No, and what's interesting is that, you know, we're really having
Government?
a lack of that, and everything is centralizing now in cities around the world. Now suddenly people are waking up to that. Oh, it's not a good idea to be in massive centralized cities, so they're fleeing out of the cities right now. So you're seeing this massive shift societally, that, you know, with the United Nations, they want total centralization in massive, you know, metropolitan cities. But what you're going to see over time is that whole thing collapses, because you had the Aztec empires and a whole bunch of other empires. They centralized in massive cities, and then forgot how to feed themselves by having nobody that actually, you know, fed themselves anymore.
Right.
And so like that is where we're at. Like we're hitting that point where we're, you know, talking about starvation. Well, yeah, it's because like nobody is actually understanding that we need food to support ourselves.
Well, and that's one of the things that Justin Trudeau has been going into with this whole Great Reset and Agenda 2030 thing that he's been talking about for ages. But I want to point out something that differentiates with those big city situations, because I'd much rather be in a small town than a big city. But with that said, and I'm going to say something that might be controversial to many, but I actually think that religion has a great say in it, because government is a huge religion, and a lot of people around the world just obey government because they see it as a religion, like a god, like it rules over them, because how could it not? But if you go to if you go to some places around the world that are based and entrenched in religions like Christianity or Islam or Judaism, many of those places tend to be the least restrictive with this kind of stuff. And the reason I say this is, I'm in Cairo, Egypt. It's got arguably between 40 to 65 million people in the city. It's insanely big. You walk anywhere, even in the middle of the night, and it's shoulder to shoulder, and no one's wearing masks. No one's locking down. They refuse to lock down. Everyone's doing whatever they want because they believe there is a God. And because they believe there is a God, they say, I will not listen to government over my God. And the government has no power to lock them down.
Well, the government needs
those people
to be
say,
God.
yeah, it would be blasphemous. And they said, basically, he will protect me. The government won't. The government, people still like government here to an extent, but they won't listen to something as drastic.
I think
as
John
giving
brought
your
up like
living
one of
to
the
do
most
it.
important points, which is, you know, decentralization. And the more you get decentralized, I mean, that is really, but there's so many things that are kind of going against the power structure of what they want to do. So on the one hand, they want to centralize everybody and get them in these small cities, but then the coronavirus is, and they also want to propagandize them and have them in the schools earlier and earlier. But now you're seeing more people getting homeschooled, which is kind of not, which is an unintended, I guess, consequence of all this, unintended consequence, at least for the globalist. And then also the fact that now people are trying to move outside the big cities is also another, I guess, negative for the, you know, the they, them, those power structure.
I'm
and
curious,
so
it's going to rebuild them and then hoping everybody will come back.
Oh, we've installed them in a smart city, and we've got guys like Bill Gates who out here, you know, maybe 30 miles south of me, out in Tonopah, Arizona, or like near there, is bought up a whole bunch of land and is going to create like this, you know, the model smart city, you know, outside of Phoenix. So
yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit about smart cities, because I'm, you know, following the actual industry. Like I'm in automation, I'm in CCTV, in you know, the access control, all this stuff. What they're actually pushing right now that became very convenient over the last 2 years now, that had been big pushes, thermal cameras, because they started to saturate the markets with CCTV cameras. So now they need to find another product to push, and of course that was thermal cameras. And now there's going to be thermal cameras everywhere. They have metal detectors with thermal cameras that they're going to have at every sports stadium around the world. They're going to install them at airports everywhere. You know, people are stupid to think that this is going to go back to a normal. That's the reason why they're saying it's going to be a new normal. Everybody's going to wear masks. There's AIs right now on these systems. Like I go and read through, because I have to understand all these systems that are out there. There's actually AIs right now that are that I could buy and install in places that, you know, will fine you from, you know, not wearing a mask, for being too many people in business, for not socially distancing. So those AIs are already
and the
out
AI can
and
figure out
being
who you are
implemented.
based on your earlobe now. So by getting everybody in the mask and 6 feet away, they can also socially profile you and determine who you are. And we are getting into this end game. And John and I and Josh, we focus a lot on the economy and economics and digital currencies. And what they're going to use is they're going to use Bitcoin like technology, the underlying technology, blockchain. They're going to use all the bad enslavement features of it, where it's going to be tracked, traced, surveilled. But the good features of being decentralized is not going to be there. And so you're going to have a CBDC, which is a central bank digital currency, the Bank of International Settlements, which that could be an entire show we could do on that, which is the central bank of the central banks, like the Vatican. It's its own separate entity, so that way nobody can go and audit it. They were doing all the basic transactions
the
for
Financial
the Nazis.
Financial Stability Board just put out a report of 60 pages or whatever it was to all the central bank heads in the world, saying that this is how we need to implement central bank digital currencies.
Jerome
And of
Powell's
course,
talking about it.
Where did they get funded from, Tim? Well, they got a $5 million seed fund to get started.
Well, they create all the money.
Used
so
to be the Financial Stability Forum that was created by Mario Draghi back in the day. Well, Mario Draghi was a Goldman Sachs boy,
and also had,
and then of course
the ECB.
Yeah, and then you had Mark Carney was the second head of the Financial Stability Board. Now it's Randall Quarles. I forgot how you spell his name, but Mark Carney is back in Canada right now.
But people don't know people don't know who Mark Carney is, so they're not all geeks like us. So you might want to.
So Mark Carney, he is a former Goldman Sachs guy. He was the former head of Bank of Canada. No, he was the former head of Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, and then he went to the Financial Stability Board. Now he's back in Canada again because he's Canadian, and now he's talking about a massive green bond system that's going to get implemented. And you know how that's going to work? They're going to actually force businesses to be able to if you want to take on debt, you got to follow the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. That's what they're implementing right now, into the economy, and that's everywhere.
Very soon you won't be able to do anything without your social credit score, and it'll be attached to your bank account. And it's not just vaccines. It's the social credit score attached to the digital currency that's on the blockchain, but it's attached to a bank account. So and John and I have done videos for years on this, specifically going back to about 2015. We talked about how if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank. And if your money's always going through the banks via digital transactions, legal tender laws, etc., it's never your money. It's always the banks. And then you're enslaved to the banking system. And I did an interview many years ago with Jim Rogers about this, about how by having this cashless system, they can control every aspect of your life. There's no escaping it because it's convenience. It's like using a credit card.
They can shut you out.
Find places that don't take credit card outside of North America. Within North America. If you go outside of North America, it's easy. But inside North America, you cannot survive without a credit card. And I tried for years as an adult not having a credit card. It was incredibly difficult. I got turned down at hotels. I tried to pay people cash everywhere. I couldn't do it because, there's tax liabilities and stuff. And I'm like, well, that's your problem, not mine. I want to give you money to sleep in this bed tonight. And they wouldn't do it. I ended up getting a credit card, and it's one of the biggest chains that holds me down, and I hate it. And this is much different because this is your life. Your life is the credit card. Then you weren't allowed to go. The government.
Then you weren't allowed to go into Bank of America because they were closed down for coronavirus violations when you were trying to pay your bill.
I know. I couldn't pay my bills, and I couldn't do it online, and it was horrible. And it took me like 5 months to get access to my money because coronavirus. They can't do anything over the phone apparently on computers because they're used any excuse to be lazy because they have all the money in the world.
This is what we need to do. We need to build systems that make the state obsolete, and so you need decentralized social media, free markets, and free speech platforms. You need cryptocurrencies that are not traced, that are privacy based, that are there. So now that you have the system collapse, because it will collapse. There's been hundreds upon hundreds of currencies.
I agree, John. But I mean, at this point in time, I think we're a little past being able to innovate. I mean, we should have have innovated years ago,
no.
and we did to a great extent, but we're at this point in time where it's hard to build systems that replace the old guard in this environment because you can't even do anything right
people
now.
are waking up. People are waking up. They're like, oh, well, yeah, the answer to everything is just get on fucking Parlor. Like, guess what? We're way beyond having Parlor being somehow, which is also, a Mercer, family.
No, I know that's not what John's saying, but I mean, and I agree with you, John. I'm just saying, like, it just seems like we're in this place where we're so pigeonholed where it's like, oh, well, it's great to say this stuff, and I completely agree, but it's almost like revolutionary take up arms time at this point.
And that's why with QAnon, which upset me the most is that all the people that should have been getting it, it's like, no, you guys have all been psyoped in the wrong direction. So you guys, I appreciate your passion and your energy, and you guys finally found out about the deep state in 2018. Congratulations. We've known about this forever, but guess what? You've been psyoped, and so it took all the energy and diverted it, and people are still, even my own family, are like, oh no, this is a Jesus spiritual thing, and the light is going to come. Well, guess what? If it is spiritual, they've attacked us through the pineal glands, through fluoride, and through big pharma, and through everything else to make sure we're not spiritual. So if it is a spiritual battle, guess what? We're losing the spiritual battle because very few people are spiritual. So if that's their argument, I don't see how. No, actually,
Tim, I disagree. Very, 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 very many people are spiritual, and their religion is government.
Yeah, in the aggregate, there's a lot of people, but
I mean, Stalin and Mao loved atheism, and they pushed atheism, and they killed Christians, Jews, and Muslims. But I want to point out, though,
look at what China's doing. They're taking down all the religions, of course, because they're competitors.
They always have. They want people to believe in the government. But I mean, I do think that, like, look, I got into this in 2006, and I'm a spiritual person in the sense that, like, I'm not a Christian or anything, but I do believe a lot what the Bible says. I do believe a lot of what they talk about, especially now.
Especially the part about whipping money changers.
Especially that. But especially in this day and age where we are witnessing so many things out of the Book of Revelations, and it's like, a big part of it for me is that good will triumph over evil eventually. But we're instilled with this ability to defend ourselves. People keep waiting for something to come and save us. We will save ourselves because we're given the ability to do that. We don't have rights. Rights don't exist as a possessive, definition.
No, we are free.
Hold rights in our hands.
We're born free.
The right or we're not.
Wait, the big guy is not going to save us? The big guy is not going to save us? Joe Biden?
No, when anybody is born, they're a free human being from any control. That's it.
Assuming they defend themselves. Defend themselves. If they don't defend themselves, then they're a slave. And you know what? People keep talking about this. Well, we want our rights back. Our rights back. We'll do something. Protesting about it. Like, this is the thing.
You're never going to get the rights back.
I said revolution only leads to bigger government, and usually it does. Taking up arms usually leads to bigger government.
It's not a revolution. It's a revolt. It's a wrong name, really, Josh, right? Because a revolt just basically you get more of the same. A revolution is a paradigm shift. So, like, revolutions like that we've seen throughout history, it's not really revolutions; they're just revolts against the status quo, and then they replaced it.
Well, the problem is with things like Google, with things like Google, where they already know where all the information is coming, they can see what the pulse of the people are going, and then it's use that pulse of the people to then divert it off a little bit, and then control the movement, and then side it up into something worse. But I do have to go pick up my daughters now, so I really appreciate Ricky having me on here, and and for having us on Union of the Unwanted.
Then why are you flipping everyone off with that cactus behind you?
Well, flipping off the globalists. So here we go. Wherever we're at. Okay, we're over there. But yeah, so all my stuff that you guys can see. So I've got. I am a financial advisor. Where I'm one of the rare people that made almost all the money last year, and then protected my clients this year from the downfall ahead of time. I was on video. Anyone can go to my YouTube channel. Probably should go to Picciott or Library. But at my Anarchapulco talk where they can see me breaking that down ahead of time. But that's thelibertyadvisor.com. And then for all the places that you can find us, including the Tim and John show and everything I do with Josh at the Liberty Advisor show. But definitely appreciate you guys having me on, and I will talk to you guys later. And next Union of the Wanted, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Arrivederci.
See you, Tim.
See you guys.
My Egyptian headband here. Hey, so I want to point out, though, because I did mention, revolutions don't usually work, but also, and I've said it for years, we should always focus on replacing the old guard with the new guard, like you mentioned, John. But right now, what we're witnessing is pretty much it's almost impossible to replace the old guard with the new guard right now in this environment. While everyone's being pushed into poverty, they have enslaved humanity. I truly believe that they will go for the throat and try to get to that 600 million population by 2030. I never thought it would be possible, in this amount of time. But after seeing 2020, I feel like it could actually be a possibility. Whether they'll actually get to that number or not, I don't know, but I think they are trying to. And I just don't know how you can innovate your way out of this. I mean, you can use cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Monero, etc.
There's lots of solutions already that are ready to go when the government falls. And I looked at so many governments throughout the recent history, because like old governments, like all the way back civilizations, is a little bit too old currently. But when you go and look at the actual newer civilizations, they all fall the same way. They all go to either to total totalitarianism or back to anarchy again. When the whole monetary system falls apart, because it's all backed upon a printing of currency monetary system, and when that falls apart, they have zero power left.
Well, that's one of their biggest ways of controlling people, but it's based in control and people's dependence on control, their comfort. People want to be comfortable in their slumber. They don't want to stand up. They don't want to shout, because that makes them uncomfortable.
That's why you have the cycles. Yeah, that's why you have the cycles. Centralization, decentralization.
Yeah, and I'm sick of the cycles. I'm sick of bouncing back and forth. I'm sick of the good times create. Weak men create. Hard times create. Strong men create good times. I'm sick of that. We've been doing it for 10,000 fucking years. At what point do we go, oh, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we should fucking take care of ourselves. I apologize for swearing. But it's like maybe we should stop being slaves and stop falling for the same tricks every time.
The problem is only the problem is only a few dozen people that remembers that throughout history and trying to tell those stories, and then there's those few dozens of people picking them up every time.
Well, so that's the problem though, because most people are stupid, and I never said this before 2020 because I felt bad for people and I felt I could reach them, but most people are stupid, and I want to be able to save my family, but everyone has a member of their family that they're like, oh my God, that person cannot be saved. There's nothing you can say to that person that's going to change them. And you just have to deal with that. I mean, eventually you just have to focus on yourself and those immediately around you. I want to help everyone, but I can't. I've been speaking out for years. I'm spending all my time, all day, every day, making videos for people, and I hope I can reach people. But at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of hope in the majority of people. I have hope in a small minority of people who will stand up and live freely. But I mean, I want people to follow my lead. The whole idea is live freely, live by example, and hopefully people will follow. And if they don't, they bury themselves. And I wish I could save them. But at the end of the day, it's that Ayn Rand idea that if you go and try and help everyone, everyone's going to need to help you. And I think at some point we have to understand the fact that it's kind of hopeless reaching everyone. Unfortunately, the way humanity works is that these empires are built up and they collapse onto 98% of people, and 2% escape and build a new society, which eventually builds up and falls again. I mean,
we all live in like a modern form of primal hierarchy. There's always like wanting to create hierarchies where there's those that actually starting to understand things better, and they are in control of things. But then the problem is that you have the one thing that really drags people down is that they get caught up in greed, and greed runs their life. So you got love, greed, and fear, that the three biggest drivers of human action in our lives. And you could have people that are driven solely on love, and those are usually the best, because but then you have also the people that are driven by greed but with love for their close
and I would agree, and I would go a little bit further in saying that I think freedom in itself is based on the idea of individual responsibility, and nothing more, nothing less. And people are willing to offset and give away those responsibilities for comfort, because it feels better to not have to do everything. No one wants to sit on the phone with a bank for 5 hours and yell at someone on the bank because some very simple thing isn't working. No one wants to have to go to the DMV. No one wants to have to go and deal with that stuff. And those are what many would call collective responsibilities, which is better defined as slavery. But then there's the responsibilities of feeding yourself, collecting rainwater, for example, hunting, growing crops, doing things like that. Most can't imagine doing that and haven't done that and don't know how to do that. And there's a reason for that. Because the more people offset their responsibilities, the more easily able they're to be controlled they are. And the same goes for the banking system. The more people get into debt, the more people end up dependent on basically a slave racket of work day and night until you die and grow a pension that's complete crap that's based within the banking system, which is actually communistic. I mean, the more people depend on that, the more easily able to be controlled they are. And I think that the number one solution to that is not to participate in that. Don't pay, insert word here, I don't want to get you in trouble. Don't be involved in the banking system. Don't live in places where they don't let you collect your rainwater. You won't be able to get everyone to stand up. So go to a place where you can stand up freely without being knocked to your knees. I am in Africa for that same reason, because it's the hunter-gatherer societies. Look at past civilizations and how they fell. The only people that survived from those civilizations were those that went and lived among the hunter-gatherers. The ones that lived among the hunter-gatherers survived because those people knew how to survive. They didn't know about cell phones. They didn't know about computers. They didn't know about any of that stuff. They knew how to live, and that is the basis of humanity itself. Responsibility, and that's where you'll find your freedom, not in some big city on a computer or doing any kind of activism in your own city. You have to live freely, live by example, and that's the only way you will be able to cure this cancer that is government.
Yeah, decentralization of everything is where we need to go, and that includes, food, water, everything, energy especially. If you have that fully decentralized in population where you're actually independent over any control grids, think about how much that could actually empower, human species for the future if we actually finally, at one point in the history of our lives that we actually got, through that hierarchical structure and actually understood that it was just everybody by themselves, but with everybody else, because we as a human species, we're very good at cooperating and creating things together. But we could still be totally free individuals.
Right. And meanwhile, everyone's focused on, trust the plan on one side. And then the other side's like, Biden, equality. It's like the most dumbest shit I've ever seen. Yeah. Like, seriously, people are misdirected on purpose. They misdirect people. It's what they call a limited hangout. Tell part of the truth, but not the entirety of the truth, in order to maintain people and misdirect people from the actual truth. And that directs them into a direction where they end up clashing together. It causes infighting. And next thing you know, nothing's solved. You have this absurd...
and then you have the people on top, because now everybody's getting more and more divided. It's so much easier to control people because they're more fractured and they're not talking with each other. They're not interacting and so on. So it's very easy. But I think that the future will get decentralized no matter how, totalitarian it will get. The cycle will turn. Yeah,
I agree long term. In the short term, I think we got 10 to 15 years of a living hell to live through. And after that passes, God forbid it gets any worse. I mean, seriously, my biggest thing for me, it's children. I know it's cliche to say that, but I can't imagine what children are going to deal with in their lifetime. This is traumatizing. And I was saying this back in February before this really started happening. I feel so bad for kids, because I have a sister who's 13 years old. She's much younger than me. And she's like growing up in the best years of her life. She's losing the best years of her life. I mean, the age between 8 and 13, maybe 15, you can, give it some leeway there. The best years of your life. I mean, as far as understanding, growing as a human being, and she's growing up in a slave racket, told to hide half of her face, getting yelled at for not standing on a spot on the floor. And it's traumatizing. Not just that, that's just the beginning. That's like nothing. What they're going to deal with the economy, what they're going to deal with the government shooting people in the streets and killing journalists and getting, I mean, I can't even imagine the social credit scores. It makes me sick. And I really hope to God that this is going to be nothing more than a lesson for future generations. They will live through the hard times and they'll be stronger because of it.
And then they will forget it again.
Our stupid generations are ridiculous. I'm a millennial, stupidest generation since the boomers. And it's just like, we're burying ourselves. And I shouldn't say we as a collective, but I mean, these generations, generally speaking, are burying ourselves.
But Josh, this is every single society throughout history. This happens. You know, we repeat these cycles, and like it's a philosophical thing. Like getting past that, as I said, that hierarchical structure that even the simplest life forms have, right? Like they have mammals in general, have created that hierarchical structure, and that's what we came out of. Like, let's be honest here.
And we feel that too. I mean, I'm in Cairo, Egypt, as I've mentioned multiple times. I went to the pyramids yesterday, and I spent 7 hours just wandering around the pyramids. And if you want to feel insignificant, go hang out around the Great Pyramids of Giza. I mean, talk about a hierarchical structure, which, by the way, was actually propped up mostly by women. Weirdly, I'm not one of those people.
Well, nature in general, like if you just go around and walk around anywhere in the world in the middle of nowhere, like you are extremely insignificant, and like suddenly tomorrow we could have an asteroid just whack out everybody, and we're all gone from the surface of Earth for a while. So we
go through the torrid meteor stream twice a year, and we dodge bullets every year, and it's amazing that we haven't. Well, we've already been wiped out largely by that same meteor stream. So we're basically playing a game of asteroid roulette every single year. So twice a year. So at any moment it can happen, and even a small one would knock out the hearing drums of 90% of people on the planet. So yeah, I find myself, I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to live in this world. I'm lucky to be where I am. We're all lucky to be able to speak into a microphone and talk to people. We're all lucky to be where we are, because 99.99% of people are worse off. But with that said, the worst places I've ever been in my life were the happiest. I mean, when I hitchhiked through Mauritania, Africa, it's the least traveled country in the world. And people are living in shacks with no air conditioning, and they're collapsing they're in the middle of the Sahara Desert, the worst God forbidden place in the whole world, basically. They can't work during the day. They sleep during the day and work at night, because it gets up to in Celsius about 50 degrees. So it's just insane. They are the happiest people you'll meet. They eat nothing but bananas and oranges all day, because they have like no food that's being shipped in. Maybe they'll kill a lamb for a celebratory dinner every now and then. But they're like the happiest people that you'll ever see. They'll give the clothes off the back even if they don't have clothes. And then you come back to the United States, and this is what warned me big time last year, especially when I got back to the United States after hitchhiking through Africa. Everyone's complaining about the stupidest shit. Oh, this air conditioner, it's 1 degree off. I'm a little cold, or now I'm a little hot. And it's like this stupidest stuff. Oh, there's not enough salt on my food. I'm like,
hey, what is that movie, Josh, that I think we're turning into? It's what is it, WALL-E? I think it's WALL-E, where all those fat little slobs of humans, is that the one? Like,
Ricky, I've never seen the WALL-E, but isn't that robot movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
yeah. So like everybody's like these fat humans that, are doing nothing basically. And that's what we're going to turn into.
The Minions from that other movie?
No. But
I'm not up to date with my kids' movies.
No, it's an interesting analogy. I watched it it came out like 15 years ago or something. But it just shows you like where you will end up if you keep on being complacent and lull into this. We're gonna all be like avatars we're gonna create our own demise through transhumanist, avatarical structures. So we're gonna and even make like humanoids. Like what is that movie with Bruce Willis where he actually is like another avatar that walks around in the city? Like that's
isn't that like that one movie with Mila Jovovich or whatever?
Yeah, I forgot, but it's basically like those type of scenarios that we're stepping into if we don't get away from centralization. I'm sorry,
I think one of my favorite movies, if we're going to talk about that, is Logan's Run, because I feel that really hardcore now, obviously in a more advanced way, but instead of there being beeping a light on your hand that tells you when your time is done, and that you must fight for the death for the government, or else.
Is that in time? Is that in time too?
In time.
That's another movie.
Similar concept.
Logan's Run came out, I think, 1975. I think Farrah Fawcett was in it, but it's one of the most brilliant movies ever made, most brilliant sci-fi movies, because it's all about how everyone's living in this domed-in land where everyone's got everything they could want. They want a woman. They put some numbers in a pad, and a woman comes to their door, and they can mate with a woman. Do they want food? They got free food. They got whatever they want. But once you hit, I think, the age of 25, then it's your time to die. And because of population control.
Or 75.
So when you want to, so when you run away and you try to escape being killed at 25, you're called a runner. And it's an absolutely brilliant movie that shows the perspective of people living in this enslaved society. And after they're able to escape into the real world and they see nature for the first time, it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen, which also brings in Soil and Green a lot too, because there's a great scene that I urge people to look up online of Edward G. Robinson. He's in this matrix of a society where everyone is controlled by government and given their own slop. Soylent Green, Soylent Red, Soylent Purple, or whatever. And Soylent Green is people. And they, it's the disposed of people that are disobedient to government. They eat the people. But this guy wants to commit suicide. It's his time to die, and he wants to commit suicide. So he gets a controlled suicide setting. He sits in a bed. They play Vivaldi, Four Seasons, and they just show nature around him. And it's the first time he's ever seen nature in his life. And it's one of the most beautiful scenes in any film. And it really just shows you a perspective of someone who's never seen a tree, never seen a deer running through a field or windswept plains, and never seen that kind of stuff. And it's one of the most beautiful things.
Hey, welcome to cities today.
Anyway, I've gotten way off track. I apologize. Some weird stuff here.
But Ricky, I gotta get going. But is there anything that you want to say before I leave?
Thanks. You want to let people know, for people who are listening, where they can get connected with you? I believe, are you on any social media platforms?
I'm on everything too. Like I'm on actually my biggest one is LinkedIn. That's where I have most of my people. But of course, now I'm with you could see me every now with Josh on Picciott, or you could see me with Tim on the Tim and John show that we have as well. But then I have my website called theeconomictruth.org, and there you can find anything that I'm up to, everything that I'm busy doing, like different blockchain projects that I'm working on. You could find my books there, buy my books if you want to, or reports that I do on the economy and so on. And you could actually hire me. I have some people hire me for advice, well, not potentially advice, but my opinions, I call it, because in today's world, you could get imprisoned if you give advice to people. So you can find all that at theeconomictruth.org. Actually, I had to upgrade, Josh, on my videos, because on my speakers page, I had to upgrade, because all my, basically 90% of my videos that I had up there as my best of videos were all gone. Josh got banned.
Well, hey, John, pimp your float.
Oh, and float that app too. The Economic Truth. On
you're not
float
on,
as well.
You're not on any of the Facebook, Twitter, any of that.
Oh, I am on Facebook and Twitter, but I say go to my theeconomictruth.org. That's where I have lots of data and stuff that you can find. I find it more interesting than you could find John the Economic Truth everywhere. Just search it up on Google and you'll find me on all the big platforms. But I'm starting to I actually stop posting to Facebook right now. Me and Tim are basically exiting as well right away from those major platforms. They're not worth.
Must be nice to exit. I got banned.
Yeah, well, I got banned too. Come on, I had 800 videos with you, Josh. Come on.
Well, I got banned on Facebook and YouTube in the same week.
Yeah. No, I know. It's we're all been in the
I'm not fired. I quit.
Yeah, that's right. What are you talking about? I'm fired.
No, but anyways, guys, as you can see here, it's pretty dark if I take away my light. So I better get on the way home. But it was a pleasure being on with you, Ricky. I really appreciate you having me on. And thanks again to hang out with Josh. Every now and then, me and Josh used to do a lot of videos together. We haven't done so much as of late because we both are very busy with different things. But it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Josh.
The opposite side of the world from each other, so that.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, anyways, you guys have a good night, and a pleasure again having me on. And I'll see you guys on Union of The Unwanted again. It's always fun.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get you guys on with my buddy Alex Craner, who's been on, because he's big into the economy and all that stuff. It'll be an interesting conversation. But yeah, thanks, John. I don't want to hold you up.
Awesome. Have a good one, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
See ya, John. But John, it's funny because it's almost 2 a.m. there, and you're the last one on the call.
Everyone's such a loser with this going to bed stuff and picking up their kids. Woo.
Well, so you were talking about the in time thing, or the time thing, and it's so true. The thing that bothers me the most about all this is the fact that the most valuable thing is your time, and they're taking that away from you. And when they tell you just wait, just give up your life, if you're alive but you're not living, what good is it that you're alive? Like, you're not experiencing things, you're not enjoying company. I know John said something about, like, you know, humans, the things that humans need the most are food or whatever. There's actually been studies where you see, you know, where they've taken away a monkey from its mother, and then they'll put it in a maze where they'll have, and then they'll starve it, and they'll put it in a maze where they'll have food, and they'll have a stuffed animal that looks like its monkey or its mother, and then that monkey will actually go towards the mother because the comfort is more important to it than, you know, than the food. And
Well, I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting, because years and years and years ago, when I was a teenager, I think I was about 15, I took up a job for a while at one of those pet shelter places. And my job was, seriously, I'm not even kidding, to hug kittens. And there's a reason for that, because those kittens will die if they don't get nurture from their parents. And if their parents aren't around them, they will just die. They literally need to be pet and loved, or else they die. And so my job was to sit in this room, and I'd have about 40 or 50 kittens crawl. I'd have a certain outfit for this. So I'd have a ventilator, everything, so I wouldn't breathe, because it's not good for you to be around that many cats. And they'd be crawling all over my shoulders, and my job was literally to pet them. It only lasted about 2 weeks, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is the stupidest job ever. But it was super cool. But I'm like, I get to pet kittens for a living. People are like, what do you do? I pet kittens. And then they think I'm crazy. But I think it's really important, because people have no perspective. And one of the things that really changed everything for me was, you know, in May of 2019, I went off on an adventure to find some ancient site in the middle of the Sahara Desert called the Rishad structure. And to get there, I had to basically hitchhike through Al-Qaeda red zone countries, through minefields, saw some stuff I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And, you know, it really changed everything I felt, you know, everything I thought about the world. It really took a chip off my shoulder, you know. It wasn't, I lost a lot of my ego because of it. I like to talk, but it's not out of ego. It's because I feel there's a desperation. But going through the Sahara Desert and seeing these people, this guy, I'll never forget him. I couldn't speak the same language as him. He spoke Arabic and French. I speak a little bit of French coming from Canada, but not enough to really get anywhere. I speak way more Spanish. And so I was talking to this guy. We paid him $150, three of us combined, to bring us on a 17-hour drive from this place called Dakhla, which is in Western Sahara or Morocco, depends on who you ask. And we drove over a landmine field. Our tire blew in the Sahara. We went through a lot to try and get to this town called Nouakchott, Mauritania. But he could only bring us to this town called Nouadhibou, which is at the top of Mauritania, rather than the bottom of Mauritania where we had to go. And so this guy lost money trying to bring us there. He paid for our hostel room in a horrible border shanty town so we could sleep the night, because we missed the border crossing. There's black mold on the ceiling, a Hello Kitty pillow, crazy bugs, cockroaches this big crawling on my face, biggest cockroaches I've ever seen. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, throw it off. That night, I was going crazy. I was going crazy. I was pacing back and forth. I didn't know what to do. I was losing my mind. And I ended up just going to sleep for about 12 hours. After 12 hours of waking up sporadically to pull giant cockroaches off my face and weird bitey bugs that were jumping and biting me, after pulling these things off all night and sleeping about 12 hours, I woke up to Islamic prayer, because there's a mosque kind of attached to the hostel I was in. And it was this beautiful sound. And I'm not obviously a Muslim, but I heard the sound. And it was such a beautiful singing voice. And, you know, all these people in this hostel, it was like a United Way commercial. They'd walk around, they had flies all over their face. They wouldn't even try and get the flies off. They just didn't care. And everything they said, they would finish it off with, if God is willing, if God is willing. I'll see you tomorrow, if God is willing. I will accept the money for the hostel, if God is willing, and stuff like that. Like everything, they finished it with that. And I woke up to this prayer, and it was so beautiful. And I walked out just feeling refreshed with a smile on my face. And the people who were driving with me across the country woke up the exact opposite. They were okay the next day or the previous day. They woke up that day and going insane. Like, what is happening? Like, why are we here in the middle of Africa? Why are there landmines everywhere? This is insane. And I woke up with like a smile on my face. And that day we drove through a landmine field.
and it was about a 25-minute drive over bumps, exploded vehicles everywhere, a lot of things I won't mention on video that I saw. And they were like, what the hell is going on? I was sitting in the front seat videotaping with a smile on my face the whole time. I'm like, I just felt at peace. And after that, I went through the whole country with a smile on my face. Everything just felt fine. Everything felt okay. I didn't feel desperate. I didn't feel like anything was sneaking up on me. I didn't feel like I needed to do anything. I almost forgot about my responsibilities. I just felt at peace, because this guy that brought us across this country then had lost way more than the $150 that we gave him. And he paid some van in this town in Nuwadibu and told us, get in. We got in, we couldn't even say goodbye, and I wanted to tip him. He just took off, and he lost so much. He lost a shirt on his back trying to get us there. But he got us there because he said he would get us there. And no matter what happened, no matter how poor he is, he made a promise, and he will keep that promise. And that's the reality of most people in the third world, is that they will keep their promise. They aren't looking for money. It's this concept that Americans and Canadians and British and Europeans have, that everyone wants money and everyone only cares about money. You get to certain parts of the world, they just want to live. They want to feed their family. They want to be able to breathe. They want to be able to just exist. And they're happy enough with that because they haven't been spoiled with the splendor of the coddled Americans and Canadians and Brits, etc. So they have a whole different outlook on things. So I remember I got back to the United States, and I was driving across the United States after this. And no offense to my girlfriend, she hadn't been in this situation, but we went through Montana, and we stopped at some motel, and she's like, oh, this is horrible. The water's cold. There's no hot water in this motel. And I'm like, but there's water, right? There is water, then it's not so bad. And that was kind of the outlook I got. Before that, I was like, oh, you have to give me a better room than this. This bed is uncomfortable, and this blah, blah, blah. Just that kind of attitude that most people have because they've been coddled in this kind of society. It completely changed my outlook. And I realized to be happy, I needed to have less. And I needed to accept, the reality I lived in and try to live in my own way around that and not just complain all the time about it. I mean, honestly, complaining does nothing. It's how you act, how you live that really matters. And
if you change
it's an amazing
you look at things, what you look at changes, right? I mean, you can look at a situation, so Civilized to Death is a really interesting book, and Christopher Ryan talks a lot about this, and some of the stuff you're talking about reminds me of him and the conversation we had, because I'm a big fan of these same philosophies. I was born in a house in Portugal where there was no running water, and I came to America. My parents brought me to America, and they came here, and they came to get financially ahead. And I see this over and over again with immigrants. I have a lot of Italian friends. I have Portuguese friends, Lebanese friends, Polish friends. Where I live in Ludlow, it's a big Polish and Portuguese community. So everybody you grow up with is either like Polish or Portuguese, but like literally like right off the boat, Polish and Portuguese. They have accents, and there's little butcher shops, and there's all this. It's nice because you still feel like that there's kind of trying to hold on to some of their culture and some of their backgrounds. But the problem with a lot of these immigrants is that they come to America and they come to get financially ahead. And they get sold this idea that if you get financially ahead, you'll be happier and you'll be better off. So what ends up happening, and I saw it with my father, a lot growing up, he would work long days. I mean, when I was growing up, you just left dad alone because he was tired from working construction all day. So, we didn't, I got out of playing soccer when I was a kid because my mom would bring me, and my dad was never at the games or anything. So she didn't give a shit about sports. So I lost interest. And, he just seemed stressed and unhappy. And I remember one time, when I was a kid, him saying this, and I didn't get it because I must have been very young. And he's like, I wish I was back in Portugal. He's like, at least there I was less stressed. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, Dad, we go back to Portugal every year for a month or two. And I see the house you grew up in. I'm like, there's nothing there. There's like, my dad's one of 12, my mom's one of 7, huge families, all, raised in these, I wouldn't even call them towns or villages. And, so I didn't get it. I'm like, you have all these material things now. I'm like, you have a nicer house, you have a car, you have, you have these things. And as I got older, it hit me. It's like, okay, you leave these villages, you leave for this American dream, and the American dream's a lie. It's that we're told that you come here and you get all these things, and if you get the right cocktail of ingredients of money and material things, then the happiness will be the outcome. And it's not. And so what ends up happening is you constantly keep searching for happiness in the wrong places. You keep searching for it in these places of material wealth, but you don't have free time, you don't have leisure, you don't have time to enjoy family and friends. We have a small family construction company, and I always joke around about how I almost stunt its growth on purpose, because I like the flexibility of doing podcasts, of never missing one of my kids' soccer practices, or being able to go to my daughter's dance, to do all these things that I enjoy that brings me happiness. And to me, like, when I see a giant big house, not in all cases, but in most cases, it comes with a sacrifice. Some people are envious of that, and I'm like, you're envious of that, but to have that giant house, it means you must have a giant income, which means you must spend a lot of time at work, which means what sacrifices? Your relationship with your kids, right. Which is why they end up being addicted to stuff, because you might have gave them the material things they needed, but you didn't give them the love and comfort and the guidance they needed. You have the wife. I mean, I know people who have I have a friend of mine he's actually a police officer who worked all these details to get this beautiful big house, and now they're going through a divorce. He's like, I finally almost got the house paid off, almost got everything all set up where the wife and I can actually enjoy each other. And he's like, now, we're going through friction. I'm like, because you kept giving her what you thought she wanted, and what maybe she thought she wanted was the giant house. But all that came with a sacrifice. The sacrifice was less time together. And relationships are like plants. If you don't water them, they die. You think they're just going to stay there, even if you ignore them and you don't give them any attention, but they don't. They die. And so everything comes with a sacrifice. And when you see some of the, like one thing you said, like some of the happiest people aren't people that have all the material wealth we have, but they have community. They have each other. There's a book called by Sebastian Younger called Tribe, and he interviewed. He was with like these, I think they're Marines in like one of the most dangerous parts of Afghanistan, and they couldn't wait to get home. They were like, I can't wait to get home. I can't wait to get home. And it was a really dangerous place. Then he reconnects with them like a year later. They're all home and they're all depressed. They're unhappy because they're working an unfulfilled job. There's a lack of community, and so it took Sebastian a moment to figure out what was going on, because he's like, I don't get it. He's like, you were in the most dangerous place in the world, and he's like, now you're home and you're safe and you're unhappy. And he's like, oh, it wasn't about being in a dangerous place. It was about a job that gave them fulfillment, that gave them a reason, because they had each other's back, their safety, all depended on one another. So all these things is what gave them happiness and fulfillment and community. And that's
in a lot of ways, it's nature too, because I mean, having spent a lot of time in countries that are so-called dangerous, when I'd go back to the first world, there are little comforts that I liked here and there, but I would also miss being in places that were kind of dangerous, because I felt real human nature, because I felt almost invincible in a lot of these places, because I go there and I realized I wasn't actually in danger, and I was in this place that everyone was afraid of, whether it be on the Syrian border, the Iraq border with Turkey, etc., and going throughout Africa. And I'd find some of the nicest people, and they were just living their life, and it was just in the most basic form, living their life. And it wasn't complicated. It wasn't complicated like so many people have made it to be under this guise of convenience and shiny things. And I think that's so important, because, I've found myself wanting to spend time in Syria, and people go, well, Syria, that's insane. Why would you want to go to Syria? Because 99.9% of people aren't going to behead me. In fact, 99.999% of people aren't going to behead me. They're very nice people. They'll offer me their home. They'll offer me clothing. They'll offer me food, whatever it might be. It's the exact opposite of what you hear in the media. And here not here, but if I was in the United States, everyone's just trying to get ahead of you. And the large majority of people, it's not that they're bad people, they're just on an addiction trip. They're just like attached to something.
And so I'll get your opinion on this, because I'm a fan of Michael Sandel. He's a philosopher, and when I barely graduated high school, and when I left school, he put when I started working full time, he put a whole semester online, and And I really enjoyed just listening to him, just his philosophy class and whatnot. But he wrote a book that I really like too called Things Money Can't Buy, I believe is the title. But one thing that stuck with me, even when I was young, that he said was, instead of creating a capitalist economy, we've created a capitalist society. And this idea of like everything, like capitalism or any ism, it's about just like, okay, let's figure out a way how we can trade goods, and we can figure out how we make this economy thing work. But it's not supposed to be the focus of your life. It's not supposed to be the end all be all thing. And we do live in a world where it's all about like, it's like fuck your friends, fuck morals, fuck all these things. It's all about how do I get ahead? How do I get ahead? And then those people are the unhappiest. So it's like we've created a society that told you, do these things, this thing will bring you happiness. And then you look at those people and they are some of the most miserable people, and the people who don't have things. And they've done research where they see a big thing that contributes also is like when the gap between the richest and the poorest is big, then you're envious, which causes anxiety, depression, all these other bad feelings. But when that gap is much smaller, when the people around your community have more or less the same shit you have, there's not a whole lot to be envious about, So you look at everybody as like we're on the same level, So that helps.
And inflation's a big part of that. But I do feel like, so I think capitalism is a very important part of society from the perspective of innovation and creating new things. And I think obviously the definitions of capitalism have been very skewed over the years. But like you mentioned, it's not the end all of society. You have to look after yourself as a human before you look after yourself as a video game character that's gaining points. I mean, you see in a lot of these places, not just third world places, second world, and even in some cases first world, many countries, where there's one family restaurant next to another family restaurant next to another, and they all sell the same thing. And there's no difference between them. You see that like crazy in places like Italy, for example. It's like 16 pasta places in a row, and they're all either good or bad. I mean, honestly, I've spent a lot of time in Italy. There's a lot of great food, but there's a lot of shabby, But with that said, I mean, they're all selling the same thing. You see a guy outside, pasta, salad, pizza, and it's like, okay, but so is that guy and that guy and that guy. They're all competing, but they all somehow manage to survive in that kind of environment. And they aren't like it's not like the same culture as like you have McDonald's and Burger King and all these major monopolies in your neighborhood. They have a very different kind of outlook on that in a lot of these European countries, and even more so in Africa, where there's like 50 kebab restaurants side by side, and just people hanging out all day, communicating with each other, talking with each other, having a good time. And I've noticed the most miserable people in my life have been the richest. And I won't mention the name of them, but a lot of people know this person. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's popular among them.
You can talk about Tim. You can talk about Tim. It's okay. He's not here.
No, I know a guy who's got hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's very, very wealthy, but he is the most miserable, fucked up person I've ever met in my life. This guy has traveled the world and gotten the perspective of other people who have more happiness with less, yet he's addicted. He's addicted to getting more money. Maybe one day I'll be happy. Maybe one day he's always distracted. Maybe I should go to a therapist. No, that's not going to help you.
Important point, because one of the biggest, I've said this so many times on this show, addiction, if you look at the symptoms of addiction and you look at the most successful people in America or even the world, they have all those symptoms of addiction only to money and power. It's all the same symptoms. You can never have enough of it. You never get your fix. You get it, and you want more. You're willing to screw over family and friends to get it. Like your moral compass goes out the window to get it. Like these are all the same symptoms. But what happens is that we look at people who have addiction to money as successful, and in many cases we look at it as motivated, right? I'm like, you're motivated, you're a fucking addict. You're motivated because you need to get more of this and you're addicted to it. You're not at peace. Like you talk about peace, they don't know shit about peace.
But you know what, it's important that those people exist, just like it's important that the guys at McDonald's that serve the people food should exist, because we need those people. But you don't want to be one of those people. I mean, it's like there's places in society where, like, for example, a lot of us get ahead of ourselves in a lot of cases where, and I think everyone has done this, where they look at someone who works like a really bad job somewhere and you just and you know they don't have any status, because all of us, we're on video, we're talking to people, and we could say honestly, oh, we have a little bit of status here and there, and that kind of boosts an ego artificially that shouldn't be boosted in the first place. And then you look at some of these people, and this ego in you says, I can't imagine being that person, that'd be so horrible. But a lot of those people that many tend to make that kind of insinuation, a lot of those people, they have a family, they have kids, and they love their life. They don't care. Their job sucks. Maybe they don't like their job, whatever it might be, but they have a family, and we can't put ourselves in their mindset. Out here in Egypt, for example, I see people all the time. There's crowds of people. People seem insignificant here because there's so many people. There's just unbelievable amounts of people on every city block. And it's dirty. There's dust in the air from the Sahara. Everything's just, it smells like gasoline. People walk in and out of traffic. There's very little regard for safety, but people have faith in themselves. They have faith in their God or whatever it might be, and they have faith in their family. And you see these people walking around, oh, well, they can't have sex until marriage. They can't, and they can't date, and they don't drink alcohol, and they don't do that. Well, maybe those are just things that we got addicted to, that we have normalized ourselves to, because these other people, while it's fun for us to do these kinds of things, these other people are very happy in their mindset and their viewpoint, and they've got a family that they love, and they have maybe 5 or 6 kids, and people make fun of it. They've created their own little army, and I think it's in a lot of ways an amazing thing, because they have this community that they created themselves biologically, and they get to hang out with these kids and talk with them and teach them and bring them up to become new, not upstanding members of society, but rather good people. And I think that's like a different aspect.
Well, this also reminds me, so there's a great podcast and kind of a debate that most people I haven't listened to, and I was kind of surprised it didn't get more popular, because it was between 2 really popular people. One, a past guest on the show, Dan Carlin, which I'm sure you're familiar with him from Hardcore History, and then he had a podcast with Sam Harris, and most people haven't listened to it. I think it was a swap cast. They both shared it on their platforms, and they got into first they were very flattering to each other. They're fans of one another, this and that, but then they butt heads at some point, and very politely. But Sam Harris has this idea that he doesn't realize that he left a team to join another team, and his team's just as extreme as the team he left. That when you leave a religious, when you're critiquing religious extremists while being a atheist extremist. And I was raised a Catholic, but I'm I don't know, I'm atheist. I'm a political atheist. I'm an atheist in probably all aspects of life. But it's they got in this conversation about how these women who have to wear these things on their heads, and they should have freedoms. And it's like, wait, but that's all your perspective on where you live, what you think is life, and what's important to them. They don't feel like they need to be freed. They don't feel like, the same thing like you're saying, not being able to have sex until you get married, to us might be the biggest thing ever. To them, it's like, it's all right. It's not something that they need or they find necessary. Or
well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've had conversations with people about this. I've been to a lot of Islamic countries, some of them kind of shabby, some in a lot better for women. It definitely depends on the individual. I would say the majority of women here are happy in their situation. And as one of my friends here said, if the feminists of North America, the new wave feminists, went to actually gave a damn, first of all, about people in other places that are actually dealing with terrible things that are happening to women. If those feminists went over to Africa, to Islamic Africa, and started protesting against what was happening to women here, whatever, most of the women would beat them up. To be entirely honest, the women here themselves would with that said, there are many women here that hate it and hate the culture, but a lot of them leave. But I would say the majority of women here are very happy with the situation, because they're very family oriented. It's how they were brought up, and maybe they rebel in different ways, and many people rebel in many ways in all religions and whatever. But I would say,
how many would come back, even the ones that leave? Because the Amish, right? They do that, right? They let you leave And then I think some huge percentage leave because they think, oh, this way of life sucks, and I'm missing out on all these things. And then a big percentage actually comes back because they realize that, like something you said, that simple way of life is actually, it seems like mentally and physically more natural for us to deal with.
It's the same way as a lot of people try to get back their childhood. For example, kids that were very popular in school, for example, and that was the best time of their life. And then
I say
people
peak too early. I always say that. I'm like, I was a big metalhead in middle school and high school. I skateboarded, I BMX'd. My brother and I grew up playing in a metal band. I wore, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Slipknot shirts every day. And then, there's people who, like you said, they like peak too early. Like they still are living on who they were in high school. I'm like, I don't care who you were in high school. Like you can't and you're going to meet people who didn't know you in high school. So they're not going to have that image of you. They're going to judge you on the shithead that you are now. Not
Yeah. And that's the thing. Cause I had long hair in high school. I like down to my hips. I was a musician. I was very different from most of the people that are around me. And the only reason I cut my hair now is just so people take me seriously when I talk about things. But I mean, I'm a very different person than the clean cut, person that you see. And, it's interesting because in high school, all the people that attacked me, and I had left high school in 9th grade before I even finished because I believed in, I wanted to learn. And that was the reason I left. I wanted to learn. I wanted to read books. I knew I was being indoctrinated. So I left. But, anyway, I mean, the people that would attack me and try and beat me up in school, those are the popular kids. They got nothing now. They're working at McDonald's. They're working at, I mean, it's sad, and I try to educate younger people on this. Like I mentioned earlier, I have a sister that's 13 years old, and often she'll say things about some trend in school. Oh, this person said this about me. This person is attacking me or making fun of me or whatever. And it's like, so what? Let that happen. The joke's on them. If they're so insecure that they're attacking you over something, just ignore it. Be your own person. Don't succumb to the popularity contest, because once you do, it's hard to ever go back, because for most of your life, you are stuck in that popularity contest. And before you know it, you're actually a complete loser. You're like 35 and trying to regain what you had in high school because you had one good year. I mean, I had one good year in 8th grade. It was a great year. I had a really good time. I had a ballet class that was in my school. We were one of the schools that were allowed to have a ballet class. So these people that were in one of the world's biggest ballets would go to my elementary school. Elementary school where I came from goes up to grade 8. And I dated like every girl in my class, and it was great because all the guys were like, ooh, cooties. And I was like, no, this is awesome. This is awesome. I'm going to get involved to get my hands everywhere. And, it was great. That was then. This is now. These people that are like, oh, well, I was the captain of a football team. I was a prom king. Like, who cares? You're an adult. Grow up. You have another life. Get yourself an identity that doesn't involve your public school indoctrination. For the love of God, you are a human being, and you need to set yourself apart from others, or else you become part of the pack and you get let off a cliff. And that's where we see a lot of the people, for example, looping all the way back, the people wearing masks everywhere because they're told to. The people that are just going along with the narrative because they're told to. These are the same people that got led along in school in the popularity contest that is school. Now they're adults and they're trying to regain that, and they don't want to be pushed away from social groups. They put so much importance in people accepting them that and the government's been genius in this. And I don't usually say that because they're usually inefficient, but they've been genius in this. They've been able to use a popularity contest of different fashion sense, different TV shows that you should watch, and then different forms of obedience that you should follow, or else you're a selfish, bad person that every group should push and push out and put in exile. It's been genius how they've been able to manipulate the human mind in this way, because this is psychology, and what we're witnessing right now is basically it's slavery by consent. You don't have to have conquest. You don't have to violently attack people or put them on train cars to a camp. You can get them to agree to their own slavery, because their social circles say if you disagree, you don't have any friends and you will be pushed out of society. And then comes in the social contract.
Again, the social contract, using that popularity contest as your own score, like in a video game. If you do good, you have a high social contract. People will allow you into their circles. You can eat at restaurants, you can have a bank account, you can buy a house, you can get a job. You can go travel and show people selfies of yourself in front of the Great Pyramids, whatever. But if you don't, then you can't have any of those things. You're going to be pushed out of social circles, and eventually you'll starve to death. They'll push you to the point of starvation based on a popularity contest. And this has been ingrained in people for decades. And you know what? It goes back thousands of years, this popularity contest. But it's very much been, it's become a very big deal over the last 50 years, especially with popular trends, because there were a lot of different outliers and different ideas that, you know, you can be identifying with one thing and another thing and another thing and another thing. But since the 1950s, fashion senses and television and media have pulled people into very small little groups. Like, for example, instead of having 70 different identities that were acceptable, now it's like 5 or 6 different identities that are acceptable. You have the heavy metal crowd, you have the preppy crowd, you have the rebel crowd, you have the drug crowd, you have, you know, maybe the vegan crowd or something like that. And they have these little things, the soccer mom crowd, whatever it might be. And if you say something that people won't like in those circles, you get exiled. And if you get exiled, then you don't have a life anymore and your status is gone. And that's how I really see this year, is that there are some that are brave and are willing to go against that social trend. But the majority of people, even if they think it's stupid, they LARP. They LARP because they want to be accepted. They want to be loved. But you know, this is something I learned long ago, was that at the end of the day, everyone wants to be loved. You go to a prison, the hardest gangster in the prison wants to be loved. But the question isn't who loves them. It's the fact that they want to deep down look in a mirror and love themselves. And that's the bottom line. It has nothing to do with what other people think of you. That longing that people have psychologically isn't to be loved by others. It really isn't. It's a good upside to be loved by others. But the number one thing that people need is to love themselves. And that's something that people just pass off. They don't think about. They just think that yearning is for someone else to accept them, and they need to accept themselves. And when I accepted myself years ago, because I spent time in jail when I was younger. I did some really stupid stuff when I was younger. I had clinical depression when I was younger. I went through a whole lot of stuff. I dealt drugs. I mean, people don't realize what, in my teen years, I had addictions to multiple drugs. I did ridiculous stuff. When I started laughing at my own pain was when I realized that it's just ridiculous because it's all in my head. And when I started telling myself that I accepted myself and I, believed in myself, that's when all this giving a damn what other people think went away. That's what led me to going to a Bernie Sanders rally and yelling at Bernie Sanders while all these Bernie Sanders fans spit on me. You know, most people would go, "Oh, that's horrible. Why would I ever do that? I'd be hated by everyone." So you believe in it. It's only you in this head. Don't allow that head to be a cage. Don't allow it to be a prison. Let it be free. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss in life. And that's what holds them back. And that's what causes depression. That's what causes slavery. That's what causes acceptance of crazy rules, crazy regulations, crazy laws, crazy ideas, crazy trends. It all comes from people wanting to be accepted, and they just don't know who they're looking for to accept them. They just don't know who they want to accept them. And at the end of the day, it's them.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good positive note to kind of wind this down with, because it is so important. You have to love yourself before you can love anybody else. And if you depend on somebody else for your own happiness, then that person might let you down and you might end up being unhappy. So I mean, you see it with relationships, right? I remember when I was growing up, I had like a high school sweetheart. We broke up, and I, went through the whole like depression thing. And I dealt with depression growing up anyways, which is probably why I played in a metal band and was attracted to that whole scene. But you know, in time after that, like heartbroken, like went through like suicidal thoughts and temptation and all that stuff, I realized I'm like, I never want to hit rock bottom again. And my way not to do it is to never depend on somebody else for my happiness, and always be comfortable with who I am and where I am. And that's really where I got to the point where I could smile again and I could be happy again. And I would always tell people, I'm like, listen, like, you're ready for a relationship, not because if you need a relationship, then you're not ready for a relationship, because you have some internal things that you need to figure out first. You should get into a relationship when you're in a happy place, and this person brings more happiness to that place, and you can share those happy moments and experiences together.
Right.
But you can't depend on somebody for your happiness. And you see a lot of people who have issues with trust, issues with just being alone. It's because it's some internal issues. It might not even be that it's the significant other. It's you have to find happiness, be comfortable with who you are in your life, and then you bring somebody else in. Or if not, you're a broken human being who's trying to depend on somebody else to try to keep you fixed and keep you steady and keep you psychologically
yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned the relationship thing. I mean, I remember the thing that actually broke my depression was being I ended up I got in a breakup. It's I was the one that broke up with them. The first person that broke up with me just blew my mind. Like, I just couldn't believe that someone would do that to me. And I remember at the very end of it, I was just I couldn't even get out of bed. I was just like pinned to the bed. And I remember it was such a ridiculous thing that it almost sucks. It's almost embarrassing to even say it, but I remember screaming at the top of my lungs and then hearing the echo after I finished. And I'm like, that sounds ridiculous. I started laughing. I'm like, how stupid am I? There's people starving in Africa and I'm screaming about this. And it was literally the thing that clicked in my head that made me start laughing at myself and think of how ridiculous I sounded, and it changed everything. And, you know, that's what led to, I remember 4 years ago, state-run media in Canada tried to hire me for a job as a host of their morning show. And they were offering me a whole bunch of money. And I'm like, there's not a chance I'm doing that. Could I benefit from it financially? Sure. As far as my ego goes, sure. But would I be able to sleep at night reading a script that the government wrote? No, of course not. And so I turned this opportunity down that would have made me probably very rich and pretty well known. And I thank myself every day for saying no. On another note, just quickly before we end, I mean, I have a Netflix, National Geographic, Disney Plus show coming out this month. It's supposed to come out in September. And the reason it didn't was because I don't actually care about that show at all. I only wanted to go on Sam Tripoli's show in Hollywood, and they were paying my way to Hollywood to do this Netflix show because of my travels in the Sahara. So I said, okay, fine. Pay my way out there and I'll do your little interview. So I do the interview with them, and I'm just kind of it's like so scripted and so ridiculous. Like, they're clearly just like, now answer that again, but I'm going to have the camera over here. And I'm like, this isn't an interview. This is ridiculous. And afterwards, they wanted to license my footage. And I said, okay, well, the going rate is usually about $100 a second to license footage. So I said, you can do it for $50 a second. I think that's a good deal. The reason I say $50 a second is because you're promoting me. You know, the show is about me. So yeah, I'll give you $50 a second of the footage. I'm the only person in the world that went to the site in Mauritania, and it would cost them millions of dollars in insurance to go there themselves and film it. So, okay. And I'm like expecting a $25,000 payday from it. And I don't even care about being on TV. I'm like, all right, this will fund my media. And then they're like, well, actually, if you're asking for that amount, because they thought I was stupid, they're like, okay, well, instead we'll only use 90 seconds. We'll pay you $2,500. And I said, no, you'll pay me $3,000. They said, what? I said, well, no, you'll pay me $3,000. I'm not taking $2,500. And they're like, but it's only a $500 difference. And I'm like, and you're a multi-billion-dollar company. I'll take $500 more. Because I don't care about being on Netflix. I don't care about any of that stuff. For me, I felt like I wanted to be able to have power above this behemoth of propaganda.
I'm calling Disney pedophiles all the time online, and these guys actually do a show with me, which is the most ridiculous thing. I didn't know why they called me.
Wasn't it empowering also knowing they didn't have that power over you, that you could say the F you and you're like, you know what, you think that I need your approval.
Yeah, and exactly.
I don't.
And that was it, because they went for 5 months. They were trying to get a hold of me by email, and I was ignoring every email they sent to me. They're like, sir, we have to get our show out by September. It's supposed to air on Netflix. What are we going to do? We need your footage. And I said, I didn't say anything. I just ignored it. I'd see the emails and just scroll up. And inside, I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, I'm going to lose out on ever getting back on any of these shows again. And then I'm like, but why would I want to be on any of those shows? What part of me wants to be on that show? Oh, there's my face on TV. Who cares? TV's dead anyways. And I'm like, they're sending me all these emails. And then finally in August, I think, or actually beginning of September, they're like, okay, where can we send the $3,000? After all these months of ignoring them. And I still ignored them after that for about 5 days. And I said, okay, send it to PayPal. See you later. And that was it. And I haven't talked to them since. And they were like dragging their feet. I'm like, you know what? You're a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm not going to get pushed around as someone who has like no money from a multi-billion-dollar company because you want footage I have, which honestly, I could have charged a lot more for that. I mean, it's footage from a site in the middle of the Sahara that no one can go to, and the insurance costs millions of dollars to send a crew out as a company because there's kidnapping insurance and stuff. I never got insurance when I went out there. I just went out there and hitchhiked. But they're like, National Geographic's like, oh, I don't know, we're owned by Disney. We can't go out to the middle of the desert. That's, you know. So I mean, the point is, I felt really good about it, and you know, they were freaking out, and I could sit back and just smile at it. Whereas a lot of people would feel desperate. Oh my God, I got to get on television. I got to get this, you know, they offer me $2,500. Of course I'll take it because maybe in the future they'll hire me for another thing. Nonsense. It's stupid. Don't buy it. Never bite the hook. Go to sleep happy every night and be proud of yourself. Not too proud, but proud of yourself for doing the right thing. And that's the way everyone should live. Anyway, I've gone on about myself for far too long in this podcast today. But bottom line, I always try to tell people in my videos, just live by example. And that's freedom. That is freedom. People look for freedom and government freedom is some kind of ideology. It isn't. It's just being and doing as you please and being responsible for yourself and feeling good within yourself.
So for people listening who do want to see some of these videos and want to connect with you, where are all the spots that can find you?
Yeah, they can go to BitChute. I'm on BitChute at World Alternative Media. I'm on Library/Odyssey as World Alternative Media. Float.app as @Josh Sigurdson, as well as @Wham. I'm on Rumble and Parlor and stuff too. I'm not a big fan of those, but I'm on there. And Twitter, World Alt Media. The reason I'm on Twitter is only simply to get the videos from BitChute out. And I'll be off there soon because I've been banned from Facebook and YouTube. But yeah, people could go there and they could join my newsletter at www.iambanned.com. That's iambanned.com, which was created, by the way, long before I was banned. So a little bit of foresight there. But yeah, I urge people to go to these other sites. I'm on YouTube at Josh Sigurdson, but that's just for my travel videos. That's it. Non-controversial videos, but I'm going all out now on BitChute, and honestly, it's going quite well. So I highly recommend people go there and yeah, subscribe.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time and being the trooper who stays up so damn late to chat. And
2:34 a.m. Nice.
But yeah, thank you so much. I'll send you obviously the links to all this once it's up and live and whatnot, and I'll also let you know when the next Union of the Unwanted is. If you can make that one or any of them, you know, you have a open invite. You can come join us anytime. And
Awesome.
And thanks again. I appreciate it. Get some sleep, and I'm sure we'll be in contact soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Josh. Take care.